when he passed him out. And then the last meeting,
If you want to,
you had him.
you can
didn't
bring
grab
one down. There's one here on the end.
Oh.
Are you using that chair, Stacy?
Do you have any more of these?
No, I'd rather stand.
Okay. You can grab that, Bill, and sit where you just need enough room for Joanne. Are we on yet, Andrew? We are on. Welcome, everyone. This is the November 13th version of the Goffstown Budget Committee in conjunction with the Goffstown School Board. A lot of the principals are here. A lot of the administrators are here. So what I'd like to do at the moment is go through and we'll do our normal roll call. Dick, if you'd like to start going around the table.
Richard Fletcher.
John Burt.
Jen Getchell.
Guy Karen.
Dan Cloutier.
Paul Ogros.
Christy Garrison.
Bill Bates.
John Dillon.
Scott Gross.
And Suzanne. And I saw Keith. Oh, Bill.
Bill Gordon.
All right. We have a few excused absences. Ivan Beliveau, Bill Hart, and John Heichel. I expect Kathy Samard, and that would be the rest. She should be here momentarily. Keith, are you in the room? Then I'm going to defer to Stacy. Stacy, would you like to introduce the administrators and the staff, and
Absolutely.
if there's any school board members?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're still coming in, but I would like to introduce Ray Labor, who's our business administrator. In the back, we have Jerry Agate, who's our facilities director. Brian Bulkey, who's our assistant superintendent for student services. Mary Claire Barry, who's our assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and assessment. David Bousquet, who's our principal at Bartlett Elementary School. Leslie Doster, who's our principal at Glen Lake School. And that's all I see at this moment. Suzanne Tremblay, you already introduced yourself. School board.
And welcome. And we have a near record amount of visitors today. Welcome for coming. What we have today, and Keith has entered the room.
I have.
Stacy.
Just looking for him.
So Stacy made all the introductions. Thank you.
Oh, she already introduced them all?
Yeah.
Oh, there
Did
goes
you have
two
something
down
else to
mine.
say? Did you want to have anything to say?
Yeah, I just actually really, I don't know if Stacy had a chance to thank everyone for coming. I especially want to thank the fact that we have members from the community here today, which is great. If you guys get hungry or thirsty, there is food right over in the other room. Please help yourself. We managed to get some time and money donated for that. So it costs us less than $25 for the school district to bring that in. She already, did you introduce all the board members that are here?
I did, except I just see Frank walking in and Jen Thoreau and
Jen
Melissa.
Thoreau is Frank Driver's principal. Jen Thoreau is just about to walk in the door. That's Jen Thoreau. We'll just make sure we introduce everybody so people know. Diane McCarthy, I don't know if she was introduced before. We did take a look at the motion that was made back in June for the 10% cut request in the budget. I didn't want you guys to think that we didn't give it any thought, but what we needed to do was provide a budget that we felt that was going to provide the quality education that we are currently providing. We didn't want to try to slide back. We're not looking to make this year a progressive year where we're moving forward on anything, but we didn't want to slide back on the progress we've already made. So that's what this budget is going to reflect for you. If you'll notice when Stacy goes through it, you'll kind of understand when you start seeing our numbers why we couldn't do a 10% reduction and still be responsible to our students. Our contractual obligations alone are $3.3 million more than this year, yet our increase is only 1.5, so we have done a job on absorbing some of them. I believe, Stacy, you're going to allow questions at the end of each section on that. Last thing, while I have you here, we have an audience. I really want to thank we have Philip Bankus, the school board member. Jenny McKinnon, who's a school board member, just joined us. I really wanted to thank the parent groups. With these tight budgets over the last few years, we've actually had to transfer a significant amount of the needed resources and time over to parent groups, parents, and booster clubs. For example, we found out that last year we used over 4,000 hours of volunteer time at Maple Avenue School alone in 1 year. We recently have gotten donations like $10,000 in order to be able to buy instruments at the high school. That's just a few examples. So part of the fact that we've cut is that we haven't necessarily reduced some things that we absolutely need, but we've transferred them to another source. And I think you can only go to the well so many times before it's dry. So we need to start taking that into consideration as well. And I thank you for your time, and it's yours, Stacy.
Before we go, Stacy, I'd like to say if we have any administrators or school board members, please feel free to sit at the tables. I just need to reserve one chair for one more budget committee member I'm expecting. Otherwise than that, I guess there might be 2 chairs left. And you'll let us know at the end of every segment. If there's something, budget committee, if there's something that's really, really charging you, want to try to get my attention and it's not affecting Stacy's flow, we could probably punch into there, but try to
Absolutely.
guide
If people
through.
have questions as I go along, feel free to ask. I am open to stopping at any point in time. If you
Wonderful.
have something, sometimes it's easier to handle the question while we're in the topic and while we're on that, so feel free to ask away.
Thanks for coming.
I obviously missed the email that said we could wear jeans today.
That's all right.
That's
all right.
Opportunity. Again, I want to thank you. What my goal here today is the beginning of this presentation will be some general information about the district, and I apologize for people who I may talk to my back. I'm going to do a little bit data about our district, information about where we are, where we're going. And then I'm going to go school by school, talk about where their budgets are, and kind of some of the highlights of their budget, some of the significant increases or decreases, so you kind of have a flavor for where those budgets are. Okay, Dan, what makes this go? Oh, there we go. Okay. So the budget process. Where did we start? Where did we go? Where are we now? So to begin the process, each principal works within their buildings, developing their budget proposals, okay? They work with teachers, administrators, curriculum chairs. So for example, at the high school, we have chairs for our English department, we have chairs for our math department. Those people get together with the teachers, determine where we are, what we need to do. We ask principals, as in past years, to develop their budget based on a zero-based budget. Okay, this started a couple years ago in the school board, with the school board asking us to do it this way. And what you'll see when you look at our budget with a zero base is that everything in that budget is defined. So you very rarely will see a budget that says, you know, $10,000 for supplies. It actually spells it out how much we budget per child, what we're actually buying. So when you look at books and print lines, oftentimes it will spell it out specifically what we're looking to purchase, how much each book is, how many we're looking to purchase. So we start with a zero number and build from there. So we don't take last year's budget and just carry it over. We re-identify what everything we need to do in that is. The next step is that the SAU administration, myself, Ray Labor, our 2 assistant superintendents, and Carol Kilmister, our HR director, meet with principals and our directors. So our directors would be like, for example, Jerry Agate, our facilities director. We meet with them and we review line by line the budget. So we go through that budget, we ask lots of questions, we look to see where cuts can be made, we ask them to describe and define what specifically it is they're putting in and why they're asking for specific things. I then make recommendations for adjustments to that budget. So if there's things that I think we can live without or there's things that I don't think we budgeted enough money for, I'll make those adjustments. The principals receive those changes. They can then kind of argue or say, yep, that looks good. I then present that budget to the school board, who then has several workshop sessions. They go through that budget line by line, and they, again, can make determinations or adjustments at that point in time. So we're here now today to present the budget to the budget committee that the school board has come to terms with and has voted on as their budget. So as you can see through the process, there's multiple layers of scrutiny on that budget. There's at least 3 times that budget goes line by line for review. And so there's lots of conversations about every dollar that goes into this budget. So I want to talk just for a second about kind of the concept that a first grader is only a first grader once, and we only have them for 180 days. I think it's really important for us to remember that as students, we only have them for 180 days. That first grade year, that second grade year, that's all we have them for. We need to make sure that our public education is a strong education for our students. We can't go back and say, we're sorry, we cut the budget, we're sorry, we can't provide this for you. They only go through first grade once. We only have that opportunity to have them for 1 year. We need to make sure that we give them the best education that they can get. We want every first grader to end first grade on grade level, reading on grade level, and have those opportunities to perform. We need to make sure that we get them there, because you know what? By second grade, by third grade, if we're not providing those educational opportunities for them, they're going to fall further and further behind, which then means it costs more and more for the taxpayers to remediate them and help them get ahead. So it is really important that we do provide that education for those students. what did we consider when we looked at this budget? We thought about the current economic climate. It is, we all live it. For those people who live in the community, who live in this state, we know what we're dealing with. We know where we are. We did take that into consideration. In fact, I would say over the last 3 years, we have absolutely taken that into consideration. We have made reductions in our budget. This is not the first year you'll see reductions. I'll talk about some of those as we go through, but we have reduced our budget and cut line items and cut into programs over the last 3 years. A good example, I was just talking to Jen earlier, was our late bus. We used to have a late bus in Goffstown. We no longer have that. That impacts families. That's a service that we were providing that is no longer provided because of a budget cut. So it does impact families, these cuts. We needed to consider future needs for CIP and the future impact on budgets. We have old buildings. Other than Mountain View, Bartlett, Maple Ave, the high school, they're old buildings. Maple Ave and Bartlett, they're 1920s with some additions and renovations. Obviously, Glen Lake is our newest school. But we need to think about those buildings. We need to think about what they need for infrastructure. We need to think about replacing doors, things like that, windows. The longer we put those projects off, and we have put them off, the longer we do that, the more it costs us in the end run. Because now instead of, I'll give you an example at Maple Ave, what might have been a door replacement 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we continued to put it off, required us now to replace, for those of you familiar with Maple Ave, over by the cafeteria, it's the doors that you go in by the cafeteria. Instead of just replacing the doors who were rotting out on the bottom, we now had to replace that entire section because it had rotted out so bad that the doors were no longer the problem. It was the actual, the entire glass casement. So again, the more we put things off, sometimes the worse it gets for us as constituents to have to pay the higher cost to actually then go and fix things. I'm going to talk a little bit. We do have two construction projects that we're looking at doing, both at Maple and Bartlett. When you see our numbers, you'll see why. We have significant space needs at both of those buildings. We looked at staffing increase and looked at increasing staff only when required. We also looked at how do we continue to identify areas that we can kind of repurpose staff. A good example of that would be at Bartlett this year. Our first grade class size was huge. We were looking at starting the school year with 28 and 29 kids in a class due to a huge increase in student growth. And I'll talk about that when we get to student numbers. But what we did was we took a reading teacher, moved her into a first grade position. So Bartlett lost a reading teacher. So to make it a first grade teacher so we could bring it down to class sizes of 18 and 19. So we are trying to repurpose and to rethink about how we can use our staff as opposed to continuously adding staff. But again, there's a payoff to that. Bartlett no longer has a full-time reading teacher. They have a part-time reading teacher, and we have smaller class sizes in first grade. So there is that payoff to that. We have to look at what is good for our children in this community. These are the future kids that we hope stay in our community, that stay in Goffstown. We hope that they go through our system and think our schools are so fabulous and this town is so great that they want to stay here. So we want to provide them a good education. We want to make sure that they're active in our community, that they give back to our community. So we need to think about what is good for our students. Our school in need of improvement, our district in need of improvement, and our focus monitoring plans. For those of you, I'm sure you've all heard, three of our schools are schools in need of improvement, which then made our district a district in need of improvement. They are specifically in the majority for our special education population, our students who are not making the same progress and who are identified with special education needs as our regular education population. So we have specific plans to look at those students and to look at how we as a district can improve in those areas. So we have to look at those things. One of the things we did last year, we identified through this process, was that our reading program was not as effective as we had hoped it would be. Last year, through ARA funds, we were able to purchase a new reading program called Reading Streets. And that provides us for real, consistent, solid, research-based reading program that we hope will help all of our students. So that was one of the things that had a significant impact on looking at that. That was almost a $300,000 program that we purchased through our fund. So it really came at no cost to the taxpayers per se in this town, but it was a huge benefit for us. We also need to look at NEAS&C and our area agreement. NEAS&C is the accreditation program that accredits our high school. That's mandatory. We also have gone through the process with our middle school, because through our area agreement with Dunbarton and New Boston, that was one of the components of that. So Mountain View Middle School is an accredited middle school, so it meets the standards of NEA SNC. One of the things that we have to always be aware of is that they monitor us on a yearly basis. We have to provide to them information when our budgets get cut. We cut programs, we cut we cut administration, we cut students. So to give you an example of that, 2 years ago we cut an administrative position at the high school. We need to report to NEASNC that we cut that administrative position, and their focus now is how are we getting that position back? What are we doing to put that back in there? Because they approved us based on that criteria. And so therefore that's a goal, that's something we have to work towards. It may never happen, but we have to work towards that. The same thing with our curriculum and instruction. If we continue to cut, we have to explain how we're going to keep going back to that. How that impacts the area agreement, if for some reason in the area agreement it talks about if we do not meet NEASNC standards and we don't keep our accreditation, Dunbarton and New Boston actually have a financial kind of reward, an incentive if we don't have that. So they get a reduction on their tuition rate if we don't meet NEASNC standards. So it is something that does have an impact if we continue to cut and reduce our expenses to a point where they get concerned. If you remember, we had our last evaluation by NEASNC, I think it was 5 years ago. Prior to that, we had been on probation. We did not have accreditation. And so when I look at from that point in time to where 5 years ago, I think it was 5 years ago because it was when I first started here, we did our accreditation and got full approval. We want to keep that going forward. We don't want to go back to where we have to then, NEASNC becomes our driver. We don't want them to be our driver. We want to be our own driver. So those are things to think about. And just that education doesn't stop. Just because we reduce budgets, we cut staff, we still have the same number of students to educate. They still come in our doors. We still have to provide transportation. We still have to provide all of the resources to our students. That doesn't stop. We just do it less effectively. And that's important to remember.
You say we just do it less effectively?
I'm sorry?
I believe you just said we do it less effectively.
We teach the students less effectively with less money. If our budgets are reduced, we do it less effectively.
I understood. I understand your question. I understand what you mentioned.
So we have educational goals for the Goffstown School District. And I don't need to read them because you can read them yourself, but obviously we need to make sure our students are reading, they're writing, they're doing math, they're participating beyond just the core content. So we want to make sure our students are well-rounded. That's why we offer athletics. That's why we offer co-curricular. It's why we offer things such as band and drama, because we want our students to be well-rounded. We don't want them to come into our schools for 6 hours a day, get their math, reading, and writing instruction. We want them to be part of our community. And in order to do that, we need to provide those experiences for them. In addition to our kind of overarching educational goals, our schools have specific educational goals. So each school develops a LEAP goal, which is our local education improvement plan, which focuses on those things. How as a school are you going to help move those things forward? All staff have individual professional development goals. As part of certification, we have to do professional development every 3 years. And so teachers have individual goals. All schools except for the high school in actually I don't have the high school in there, in Glen Lake have a school in need of improvement plan. The district has a district in need of improvement plan. And we also have a focused monitoring plan, which we got chosen for last year that looks at, again, it's kind of tied to the SINI and the DINI. It ties in the piece of the special education discrepancy between our special education students and our regular education students. So looking at how to close that gap. And we were chosen for that specifically for the area of math. So we take all of those things into consideration when we develop our budgets. So where is our current and projected population right now? As you can see, we have our end of the year June 18th enrollment. We have our October 1st enrollment, and then we have our projected 2011-2012 enrollment. Okay, our numbers aren't going down. One of the two pieces I want to point out, one is at Glen Lake. You'll see a significant dip in there. What that is due to is our preschool program. We're required by law to provide an education to our 3- and 4-year-olds who have special education needs. We pick them up whenever they turn 3 or 4. So it's a consistent basis. So we usually throughout the year have an increase of about 25% in our special education population. So that will go up by the end of the year.
Stacy, how many, if any, of in the totals count are New Boston and Dunbarton students?
That would just be at the Mountain View in the high school.
Right.
And I can tell you. 30 seconds, I can pull it up.
I have the same question.
So at Mountain View Middle School, Dunbarton, it's about 70 students that Dunbarton sends. New Boston is about 132.
That's at Mountain View?
That's at Mountain View.
Okay.
The high school, Dunbarton sends about 129. The high school, New Boston sends 252.
And Mountain View, New Boston was how much? 132, you said?
No, it was 70 and 132.
Okay, thank you.
Those are approximate numbers.
Mhm.
So that's a significant. So just so you know, Glen Lake will go up again because we'll have students turn 3 throughout the year. The other area to notice is Bartlett. We've had a significant increase at Bartlett Elementary School. I talked earlier about needing that other first grade classroom just to meet the numbers. Some of that impact was the new apartment building that was built over by Bartlett. We had 18 students come out of that apartment buildings as of this moment. They keep registering. I've heard they're full, but yeah, the other day we just had 3 students register. So we did get 18 students out of that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our English language learners population. I would say more than half of that population requires English language learner services.
Out of the new 18 students.
Before you change the slide, Stacy, the 3,010 for October 1st, what would that look like at the end of the year? Because I'm looking to balance off the middle column and the right column in the actual increase, and you said about 25%.
Correct.
Of the
About
160,
25%
so that'd be
for
about another 40 students by
Correct.
the end?
Yep.
So I could really make that 3050 in the middle column, and then 3037 is projected, so it's actually projected to go down about 13?
Well, it's hard to say because the high school, as you can see, we've got the same number. High school is a really hard one to count, so we just kind of count what's in there this year because of the fact that we have some students who will graduate early. We have some students who don't quite make it to be a senior, have to spend another year. We have kids who finish up their junior year and graduate early. So the high school is kind of a hard one to really predict actual numbers. Other than this, we've had this huge population growth this year at Bartlett. If you look at the numbers from 188 to 206, I anticipate it to stay fairly stable at this point. Although I do understand there's 2 new housing projects that have been approved by the planning board. So we're watching those to see where numbers go.
But this number here.
Yep.
If you were going to compare it, this is June. What do you expect that number to be in June?
So we would expect it to be between 175 and 180, kind of in that. It would typically end up about where the June 18th enrollment is.
Okay, so if I made it like another 22 to reach that, then I could make this like 3032, 3037, so level student population between the 2 years.
Yeah, given no other changes.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Student to teacher ratio, where do we fall in the state compared to other towns? I'm going to show you 2 slides. One is student to teacher ratio and one is to staff to student. Student to teacher ratio takes into consideration every adult in the building. Okay, so this is not a teacher and students in a classroom. This takes into consideration your administration, your librarian, your food service, your custodians, your secretaries. It kind of averages out how many students you have and how many adults you have in your building.
It's a silly statistic.
So it kind of just gives you a flavor for the adult to student ratio. And then this is your class size. This is actually looking at when you have a teacher and how many students that teacher has on average within their classroom. So you can see for Goffstown in grades 1 and 2, we have an average of 20.3, grades 3 and 4, 21.5, and grades 5 through 8, 24.5. Now, I bet there may be some parents in this room who would say this may be inaccurate, because right now our 4th grade currently has 27, going on 28 in some classes. So this is again from October 1st of 09, which is the most recent data that the DOE has. And then you can see some comparisons, and I apologize, the bottom piece, just so you know that New Hampshire education rules require us to have in K-2 a minimum of 25 or fewer students, but we should try to achieve 20 students or fewer in a class. Grades 3 to 5 must have 30 or fewer students, but we should strive to achieve a class size of 25 or under. And 5 to 12 must have 30 or fewer students. So those are the Department of Ed regulations that we have to live by and make sure we meet. And then what, some people ask what those other districts are that we compare them to. Some of them are surrounding districts that we compete with. So for example, Bedford, Bow, Manchester, John Stark, those are districts that we compete with for our teachers, for our students, where you're living, where you're going. Some of the other ones are comparative districts in size. So for example, Merrimack Valley is a multi-district SAU who sends students collaboratively to their middle school and high school. So it's a very similar. Laconia has about the same number of students as we do. So those are the comparisons. And you'll see those same comparisons on all the
And this
slides.
data is coming from the Department of Education?
Correct. All this data comes from the Department of Education.
And if I can, Stacy, I'm looking at the student-teacher ratio, which isn't student-teacher, but it's all adults in the building.
Correct.
Have we done any kind of analysis to find out? Because this screen makes it look like we don't have as many teachers, actual teachers in the room, but the other screen right before this one looked like we had more adults in the room. Have we done some analysis to find out why we're higher on the total adults in the room versus having them in the class?
Right, and it goes back to that whole, the concept of the two different pieces. We don't necessarily have more adults in our classrooms.
Right.
When you look at the student-to-teacher ratio, it includes secretaries. So our secretaries certainly are not in our classrooms. They're in the office. So it takes every adult in the building. So it's kind of a how many adults are in a building compared to the number of students you have in the building. The class size takes into consideration how many teachers are in a classroom with students.
I think what I was trying to focus on is our average of adults in the building is higher than the state average, but the number of teachers we have per student is below the state average, meaning we don't have enough teachers, but we have more adults. And I didn't know, because it said 14,
Because this,
backspace key.
That's 14 students per adult, not adults per.
Okay, so, good, this helps me.
so we have 14 adults per.
That's what I heard you say. Is it 14 students per adult?
You're right, 14 students per adult.
It wasn't me, it was.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
14 students per adult, and so it takes all the adults into consideration.
Go ahead, Bill.
I hate that.
Yes,
Stupid
in the
statistics.
computation of these ratios and the counting of how many adults there are, is that a consistent thing across all these districts?
The Department of Ed, every year we fill out a staff survey. We have to indicate how many administrators, how many secretaries, how many SAU staff, how many superintendents, assistant superintendents, how many principals, assistant principals, dean. There's categories for everything that we have to indicate and send to the DOE. So as long as the DOE data is good, it's a
Now,
good.
does that
I
go-
haven't asked them. I haven't gone and inspected their data, but
Does
they've
that go
used the same
all
formula.
the way down to like the custodial staff and the
They've used.
cafeteria
We
staff?
report everybody.
So if one school district vended that stuff out, they wouldn't be counting those bodies.
I suppose you
Okay.
could say that.
Thank you.
Oop, wrong way. Go forward. We don't want to go backwards. Okay, our projected class size for the 11-12 school year. What do our numbers look like right now? Based on our current,
Going back to if they vended that service out, wouldn't they still be in the building? You would still need to report them. It is based on.
yeah, but it's a contracted service. I don't know how it would be reported. I don't want to inaccurately say what the DOE, how the DOE reports it.
But it is
I don't know.
possible they would.
It is possible that they
because
report it.
they're in the building.
Yeah, it's contracted service. So for projected class size, we're looking at Bartlett having class sizes of 18 for grades 1, 2, and 3, and 25 for grades 4. Again, I put a little caveat on the bottom. That is including adding an additional teacher. If we don't add that additional teacher to third grade and kept it at 2 teachers, we would be at 27. And those are based on our current numbers that we have right now that we know are in our schools. Maple Ave is at 20, 20, 23, and 25. Again, our 4th grade numbers, if we were to get a few students in, it's easy enough to get to 26 and 27. It's not a hard number to attain. Mountain View Middle School, we're looking at 23, 24, and 25 in a class. Again, one of the things that is important to remember, both at Bartlett and at Maple, one of the problems we have this year with our class size of 27 is we just have no more space. There's not another available room to even put another class in. So even if we wanted to say we wanted to make the current 4th grade class size a little smaller, we just don't have another space to put them unless we go through the expense of bringing in a portable and having that expenditure. So we do have a committee that's looking at 2 building projects for both Bartlett and Maple to add class size. If you've been in those buildings, they're both significantly. We're using closets for classrooms. I mean, they're really, really tight for space. Educational attainment for teachers, and again, this is all data comes from the Department of Education. We have to report how many of our teachers have their bachelor's degree, their master's degree. And so if you look at Goffstown in comparison, our teachers with our bachelor's degree is 59.2%, 39% of them have their master's degree. I'd rather see it the other direction, where we have more teachers with master's degrees. One of the things the school board did at our last teacher's contract was try to encourage teachers to get their master's degree by shortening the step down to 10 steps for teachers who have their bachelor's degree, so they can't continue to move up unless they move over and obtain further degrees as an encouragement. One of the things this does tell us, though, is that we hire teachers with bachelor's degrees, which means we're paying less for them. And so we try to be conservative. I will tell you, since I've been here, our turnover has significantly reduced. My first year here, I think we hired 60 to 70 teachers. I remember the library being full. Last year, we hired 12 new teachers. And I will tell you, the majority of them were all bachelor's step 1, because that's what we feel like we can afford to buy right now, is beginning year teachers. So that kind of gives you an idea of where our teachers perform. They're all doing a great job, but we don't hire expensive teachers.
1.5% with greater than masters. How many total teachers? I'm trying to do a count, estimate.
Oh gosh. 300.
Well, no,
oh,
no,
how many?
our
Oh,
faculty's about-
1.5%. I think we have
faculty's
2
200, right?
faculty that have doctorates.
Okay, and that's what that means.
Yes, that would
Okay.
be people who either have their CAGs or their doctorates, and I believe we have 2 who have their doctorates. A teacher at the elementary school and a teacher at the high school. Average teacher's salaries. So this looks at where we fall for an average teacher salary. Again, this is not a starting salary. This is not a high-end salary. This is the average salary of our grid. Again, calculated by the Department of Education. Goffstown's average teacher salary is $45,680. It's important to note our surrounding districts, where their average teacher salaries are. One of the things we struggle with is trying to be competitive and keep our teachers. We spend a lot of money when we hire teachers to train them, to make sure that they're knowledgeable about our curriculum, they're knowledgeable about the instructional practices. A good example is we bought Reading Streets, and we're using that program. We've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on training teachers how to use that program, how to use it effectively, how to use it with true value, so the fidelity of the program is intact. It's a lot of effort that goes into that. A teacher goes to Bedford when Bedford opened up, or Bow, and can make $10,000 a year more. When there's openings, they run. Well, who wouldn't? Who wants to make $10,000 a year more?
Excuse me,
You know?
Stacy?
Yes.
I'm looking at a spreadsheet that we were emailed last night about salaries, and compiling this data for full-time teachers, I'm arriving at a number of 53,000.
Okay, I don't know I don't know, where did you get the spreadsheet from last night?
Those are the ones that I think Keith sent
Those
me
ones Ray
on.
put together this week. I can pull them
But
up.
you know what we can do to keep flowing, Paul?
Yeah, I'll have to
If you don't
look.
mind, if we can look at it and On Tuesday, we're gonna meet again if we can't take a greater look, and that'll be one of the things we'll see, where you derived your numbers, and
absolutely.
possibly to see how the
Yeah.
state, because the
Because
state does
these
some,
came right off of the Department of Ed's website. So.
right.
Well, that was my other question, is there appears to be an apples and oranges things here, because John Stark, of course, that's a high school. So we're mixing high school, unless you're saying district, but some of these are districts that would
they're
involve a high
comparative.
school only.
Yeah, and they're comparative. So when you look, for me, when I look at John Stark, even though it's only a high school, a teacher from our high school could go to John Stark and make that money. So while it does say district, I think what you need to look at is who are our competing agents and where a high school teacher could go to make more money. We need to be competitive. We need to retain and attract teachers. It doesn't help us in our classrooms to have teacher turnover, every other year, to have a third grade teacher turn over. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help our students.
Oh, I agree. I was just
Yeah.
saying that
Yeah,
Goffstown
absolutely.
is a clear average across all grades, whereas John Stark is a high school
But we pay
only.
our teachers all the same. It doesn't change based on whether you're an elementary or high school teachers. Our teachers all make the same amount of money.
Bill, did you have a further question?
Yes, is this comparison, we're comparing their salary. Across the state, are the benefits and everything that loads up to the total cost?
This is just salary.
Okay.
Just salary information. Yep.
And-
They get,
and
we
they're
send,
not- And they wouldn't be like, perhaps, dead consistent across from one district to another in terms of the additional cost of having.
right, like health insurance benefits are not included in it.
Right.
Strictly, they take our salary grids, like we have to send them all of our salary grid information when we do new teacher contracts.
Do you have an idea of how our district compares to other districts in terms of their benefits?
That I don't. I mean, I could certainly do research. I will tell you that you can get information from other districts on what percentage. If you go to the School Boards Association's website, they actually have every teacher's contract listed on there, and you can actually look to see what benefits every teacher has. What you can't get off of there is the actual cost of those benefits. So, for example, a lot of contracts will tell you we'll pay 80% of the teacher's health insurance plan, they pay 20. What you can't ever get is the actual cost of that, because districts don't share it. Cost per pupil. So again, this is how the Department of Ed kind of equalizes it out. So they take different, so I will tell you $9,500 is not our actual cost per pupil. If you took our total budget and divided it by the number of students, what the Department of Ed does is equalizes it out. So they take out specific items such as transportation, because not everybody provides transportation. Transportation is not required at the high school level. It's only required up to 8th grade. So there's some districts who don't provide it. They take out special education costs because, again, for a small district, if you have a $120,000 placement, it's a much more significant impact than a larger school district. So they equalize it out. So every line item is the same for each district. So while our cost per pupil is not $9,500 when you divide it out, it's the equalized value from the Department of Ed. So you can see that we still significantly fall lower than the state average, and where, again, those same districts fall.
Yeah, just a quick question. Like you said, if you take the number of students we have and divide it into the budget, especially when you're talking about just Goffstown students, not New Boston, we're looking at 14,000. Does the state, when they come up with this number, include the New Boston and Dunbarton enrollment, or is?
Correct. They would include it because those students go to our school.
So without the New Boston and Dunbarton enrollment, that number would significantly climb, because you're talking about 583 students.
Correct. If you didn't include those, but we do get tuition, and I'm assuming the DOE then would include our tuition as a revenue piece.
Okay.
So that's their equalized value, kind of taking everybody's same line and budget dollars into it.
Does your current proposed budget include revenue from New Boston and Dunbarton? Is it exclusive of it?
It does include it. Yep. We put that in
So
as
it's
revenue.
presumed that you've already got it, and then the 30 some odd, or the 35 some odd, or 37 million is to educate the Goffstown
No,
students.
that's to educate everybody.
Okay, that's what I needed
And
to
then
know.
the revenue, that's to educate everybody who comes to our schools. And then the
And then the
revenue
revenues
side
apply
will
to-
show the
Okay.
tuition.
All right.
And so that would balance, so you kind of subtract that out of the revenue
Great.
piece.
Thank you.
Stacy, is it fair to say that if you had 583 students less in the district, Mr. Karen has described, it would cost substantially less?
Absolutely.
Your budget would be substantially smaller.
I mean, if you took 300
Well, your
students out of the high, if you took 300 students out of the high school, we absolutely would, I mean, we'd absolutely have to lose teachers. I mean, there would be definite cuts at our middle school and our high school if we lost 500
Yeah, but
students.
you'd lose revenue.
But
It would not
absolutely.
be equal ratio, Stacy, because of the fact that you have specialized classes when you get into the middle school and into the high school. You'd still be offering these different classes, but the classroom sizes may be lower, and we may be able to cut down some teachers, but our overhead costs of running the
Right, the building
won't
doesn't change. Yep.
And they do contribute towards the depreciation and the overhead costs of Mountain View and the high school for
Correct.
tuition students.
So even though it's theoretically offset because of the revenue from those two towns, it's still costing us money to educate them.
No, they're paying
No,
the
they
true
pay
cost of
the
what it
true,
costs
they pay
to
the
have
true
them.
cost. They don't pay this number. They pay the true cost of what we've spent.
Okay, all right.
Because we
Yeah.
include depreciation of the buildings in the
Absolutely.
calculation.
Oh, you do? Okay.
As well as overhead for our buildings
Yep.
and the cost of
And
their
our
tuition.
area agreement's a public document, so if anybody wanted a copy of it, you could just ask the SAU, we have them. And it actually calculates how we do the tuition rate, it calculates what the agreement says, what we have to offer. It talks about the ANE, ASNC, it talks about if we aren't accredited, what that means, so.
That's all in the
It's all
agreement.
public, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
So, in fairness, just so that it doesn't get misconstrued, I can't hope to tell you where the $14,000 number that was left on the table came from. But when you do the mathematics of what it costs to educate all of the students in our district, that's where the DOE number comes from.
Correct. And this was just a little data poll that I did based on the information from the DOE. There's 162 school districts in the state, and these are the school districts that had a lower average cost per pupil than us. And so you can see some of them with the 1 asterisk indicate that they fell below Goffstown the year before. 2 asterisks were the 2 years before. And again, like New Boston is just an elementary school, and so you can kind of see we're pretty low, given that's all that is below us. And then I put this caveat up here, although it is, again, more data. It's difficult to compare individual schools, so a middle school to a middle school to another middle school, because not everybody has the same age range. But just for a point of reference, there's 18 elementary schools that have lower per pupil expenditures than Goffstown, 3 middle schools, and 6 high schools. And again, it's not a true number because of the fact that if you have a middle school that's 6 to 8 versus 5 to 8, you would think that the number would be lower, but it gives you a good comparative that there's only 3 of them. No matter what their population is, that's lower than us.
I don't know what that means. What are you comparing to again?
So if you took this, the Department of Ed breaks down the cost per pupil for the overall, then for elementary, middle, and high school. The only true schools are high schools, which typically, other than maybe a high school that has an 8 to 12 or maybe a 10 to 12 range, the majority of high schools are 9 to 12. I would say probably 90 to 95% of high schools are 9 to 12. Elementary and middle schools fluctuate in numbers. And so you may have a middle school, our middle school is 5 to 8. You may have a middle school that's a 6 to 8. You may have a middle school that's a 4 to 8. So they calculate out an average cost for that middle school, no matter what age range it is, and gives you a middle school number.
But I mean, what's the pool? What's the comparison pool
The
here?
comparison is the same comparison as we just talked about.
Of the ones
It's
we
those
just
same
talked about,
numbers.
okay.
Correct.
Stacy, if I could,
Absolutely.
I pulled this last night in preparation for this meeting, and it was that same thing that you brought up, cost per pupil.
Yep.
I just wanted to make note that, let's use Dunbarton and New Boston. They will have an elementary number, but they do not have a high school number associated with them, or a middle school. So it does, Goffstown's number represents everybody, New Boston and Dunbarton, but at the elementary level, they are broken down, Goffstown, New Boston, Dunbarton, because they have a school there.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of who makes up our population. What do we educate in our school districts? Our free and reduced student population. These are students who would be our low-income students. They're students who are eligible for Title I services, which are additional reading support services. There are students who give us our Title I funds. So when we have a couple of reading teachers at our elementary schools that are paid through Title I. That's where that comes from. As you can see, we've had somewhat of an increase at Bartlett in our free and reduced population. At Maple Ave, actually all of our schools have had a somewhat increased number. I will say some of that is probably likely the economy. We've also really tried to do a good job of gathering those students because, of course, every student who is eligible for free and reduced lunch brings us money in Title I funds. So the more students we can capture, they do get free or reduced lunch, but it also adds into money for our Title I funds. And so, again, provides more services to our students. Our English language learners, these are our students who come to us who don't speak English or speak limited English. Right now, or actually on October 1st of 2009, we had 14 students who met that criteria. When a student comes in, we have to give the parents a survey to fill out on what is their primary language. If they say something other than English, we have to do an automatic, we're required to do by law, an evaluation of that student. We then have to provide services based on how that student performs on that assessment. The service provision is all directed by the state. So if they score a certain score on the assessment, we have to provide X number of hours per day of services. I did put on the top, we currently now, because this is, the Department of Ed doesn't have the new numbers, but we currently have 26 students who need to receive ESL services. We have a full-time teacher and we have a full-time paraeducator. 2 years ago, in one of the budget reductions, we reduced a part-time paraeducator from that program. We were not anticipating the project by Bartlett to bring us a whole slew of students who don't speak English. We just had an audit last week from the Department of Education on our ESL services, ELL services. You'll hear kind of both languages, both terminologies used. They are asking us, or basically telling us, that we will need to provide another ESL teacher. That is not in our budget. We did not know that was going to come out before our budget. One of the things we need to be cautious of is making sure we provide the services. The finding agent for this is OCR, the Office of Civil Rights. We don't want them in our schools. They come with huge fines. They come with huge, obligations if they find things wrong. One of the things they can do is come in, and if they see an issue, they can look beyond that issue to see what else we're doing. I think we're doing a great job with this population, but obviously having an increase from 14 students to 26 students in a year has a significant impact on what we can provide. So we are looking at that. We're looking to see how we can do it, what we're going to do. Again, this is another area we may have to shift some staffing to provide this service. Unfortunately, it's not shifting a teacher to this because we need to have somebody who's certified as an ESOL or an ELL teacher.
Stacey, so that when this happens, when you get an increase like that, your funding for it from the state goes up?
Yeah, we get about $3,000 in funding for our ELL
the whole
population.
program?
MC, is that about it? 3,000, 4,000?
Around 4 grand.
Yep, we get about $4,000 for the whole program. So there's not a whole lot of money in that one.
What would the acronym ELL?
English language learner.
English language learner.
Stacy, the law is so broad that in the event that you needed to communicate with a parent of an ELL student who spoke no English at all, the school would have to provide
An
a
interpreter.
service, an
Correct.
interpreter.
Yeah, if a parent doesn't speak English, we're required to provide somebody to come in and interpret for us, for that child. We're required to provide documents in their home language. So it means paying somebody to come in and translate our documents into Spanish, into any language that they may speak.
Is it just Spanish? There must be.
Oh, no, we've
Okay.
got them all. I think if you look, Manchester is 989. I think they talk about having something like 30 different languages. I don't know what our population is. I don't think we've had any really crazy ones, but the other piece of that to remember is what this brings in is students. We've had students who have never been in a classroom before.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just somebody who moved from Europe who doesn't speak English well. These are kids who move here from Swahili, from Africa, who are in 7th or 8th grade who have never been in a classroom, who don't know what it's like to sit at a desk, to have a bell ring. So you're really teaching these kids kind of a survival mode, how to even behave in a school. So It's an interesting population to work with, so this is one we're definitely watching. The Department of Ed, like I said, has some real significant concerns over the increase in numbers, and how we're going to be able to provide those services for those students.
Can I ask one more question? And do you mainstream them into the regular classroom?
Absolutely.
There's not a resource room
No.
where you get them up to speed?
Yeah, the goal of English language learners is that you don't teach them in the language. So to clarify, we don't have to have somebody who speaks all of those languages. What you do is it's embedded. So you, the student attends regular classes, and then what you do is provide kind of tutorial support. So for example, in science class, the teacher may pre-teach them vocabulary, so that at least when they're in the classroom, the vocabulary comes out of them and they kind of have a better understanding of it. So it's kind of it's a real immersion program for us, for all districts. Actually, it's against the law to pull them out and provide a individual program for them. So it is a challenge. It's a challenge for our teachers to have a student like that in the classroom who doesn't speak English, because you have to figure it out. It's a lot of hand signals. It's a lot of math works really well because numbers are the same. Our preschool enrollments, we talked about this earlier. We, again, just as a reminder, we are required to provide preschool services, preschool programs or services to any student who turns age 3. So it's not at the end of the year, it's when they turn 3. So we have kids who turn 3 all year long. We have kids who turn 3 in the summertime. So right now, we have 56 preschoolers enrolled. The state, again, the special ed rules have changed 2 years ago. Change it. The maximum students we can have in a preschool program is 12. And so that required, if you remember a year ago, we added another section of preschool because we were at 13 or 14 per class, so we added another class to keep it at the maximum of 12. We usually start the year a little lower, so we may start at 8 or 9 because by the end of the year you get to that 12. We do enroll, you may hear that we do enroll typical students into our program. Part of the law requires us to not have a self-contained kind of low-functioning program for autistic kids in preschool, that it's an integrated program. So we tuition students in, parents pay a tuition fee. So all of our typical students who are in those programs do pay a fee to Goffstown to enroll their students in there. So it's not a free program.
What is that fee?
I believe it's $1,200
a year
for the 4-day-a-week program. We have students who sometimes come 2 days a week, 3 days a week, so it changes a little bit depending on the needs we have and the students who are interested.
What's the 56 students? How many are required by federal law and how many are enrolled because they're paying a fee?
That I believe, that's all special ed, or is that all?
No.
That's mixed.
The whole program, but better than 50%
That is special ed.
And is that where the 12 comes in, or is it the entire program?
It's the entire program, including regular and special ed students. Can't go more than 12.
So if we had too many special ed students, we would have to not bring in the other ones to try to keep it under unless we can try to balance it.
We also have to try to
Understand.
keep a 50-50 balance.
Right.
So it's a guessing game. Leslie does a great job in the beginning there trying to balance a classroom, because knowing that our special ed population is going to increase. We also have to watch because we also don't want to have, a classroom of 12 and have 6 low-functioning autistic kids in one class and just 6
Right.
speech and language kids in another. You want to try to balance them out.
These half-day programs or full-day?
They're half day,
Yeah.
2.5 hours. They match our kindergarten program.
And, go ahead.
For the $1,200, is that fee set by you guys, or is that fee
It was set by the school board.
state?
It was set by the school board.
And when was the last time that fee has increased?
We increased that fee actually 3 years ago. 3 years. I think my first year we increased it because it was really small, and we looked at what our kind of costs are for paper and supplies and stuff, and increased it to $1,200. We also wanted to be competitive with community preschools. We knew that. Remember, you're agreeing to put your child into a special education preschool program. It's not a typical preschool program. They get a great education. I think they get a great preschool program. But you also are doing this knowing you're putting your child in with perhaps 4 or 5 autistic, low-functioning kids. And so it's a lot of parents do it because it's a good program. But it's not something people are clamoring to say, yeah, I want to go put my typical child in with 6 autistic kids.
There's not a waiting list?
We have had waiting lists. We've had where we've done, a lottery for who gets into the program. Absolutely, we have.
Because that's very reasonable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, Stacy, we increased it from $900 up to $1,200.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, and that's fairly competitive with local. We try to stay within that competitive range.
Yes, is Pembroke a high school? Or is it just they don't offer preschool?
Pembroke probably either doesn't offer preschool, they may use community preschools, or they didn't report the data. If there's not data on that sheet. Yeah,
Okay, but
they may not
Pembroke
have-
is first through 12 then when
Yeah,
you report?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, they just may not have reported their data.
thank you.
Dropout rates in 0809, the state average was 1.7. Goffstown High School was 1.6, so we're a little bit below the state average, which is a good thing. The other thing it's important to remember that along with dropout rates, the reason this has become so important is with the new legislation passed 2 years ago, SB 18, students can no longer drop out of high school before they are 18 years old. That's had a significant impact on us in the sense of we had 16 and 17-year-olds who had dropped out of high school. That one is we had to go back and find them and bring them back. Well, a kid who was 16 at the time who's now 17, dropped out of school a year ago, has a job, is working. His last thought was coming back to Goffstown High School. And so we had to be creative. We had to look at programming. We continue to have to look at different options. We have our alternative education program, which does a great job. We have our GAP program where students can get a regular, an adult ed diploma. They can take credit classes. We're looking at offering the GED program. We offer a GED. You have to go take the test somewhere else, but we're looking at offering actually the test on site. We're exploring that option. So what this has done is it has forced us to go beyond the walls of our schools and be creative and try to find out other ways to educate these kids who are potential dropouts. We can no longer at 17 say to a student, I'm sorry this isn't working for you. Here's a plan. Go get your GED. We wish you well. We now have to figure out how to educate them. We have to find something for them to do. So again, with that come costs. We have to find something for them to do. We do get really creative, but we still have to support that. Special education, again, we're required to provide special education services from the age of 3 to 21, if so needed. These are kind of our numbers and our percentage of our general population. As you can see, Glen Lake shows pretty significantly higher, and that's because of the preschool program. The goal of preschool is for special education, so you would expect that to be a little higher. Maple Ave is a little lower, as you can see. We do a really, really great job over there in our response to intervention model, so we really try to capture kids before they need services and get them embedded right into their typical day. The Reading Streets program is going to help us even more significantly with that. The state average is between 14 and 17%, so we're right about with the state average. But as you can see, when you get to our middle school and high school, with 138 and 206 students who are identified with special education, there's a whole host of things that come with that. Annual meetings, administrative services, you've got, to write IEPs, you've got to provide services for all of those students. So again, it comes with a significant impact, and you see that in all of the budget lines of your 1200s, which are your special education lines.
Stacy, I have a question. I guess my question is, if it's hypothetically half of our kids are coming from Maple and Bartlett, each school respectively get to Mountain View, why would Mountain View, is it because of New Boston and Dunbarton? I mean, if we're doing early interventions, why is it that the numbers go up as they go from middle to high school? Are they getting tested? Are they all of a sudden parents are saying, wait a second, I've got an issue here?
Typically, so let me step back. In order to be identified as learning disabled, which is our biggest category, and I'm being very broad in this definition, Brian will probably scream at me, but in order to be identified, you have to have a discrepancy between your potential, what you're able to do. So we give you an IQ test to see where you're capable of, to demonstrate that you're at least average intelligence. And then there has to be a discrepancy between that and where you're actually performing. So typically, a first or second grader, there's not a huge discrepancy. It used to be a 2-year discrepancy was what you had to demonstrate. So if I go back one law ago, it was identified as 2 years. By 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, that 2-year gap starts to show up. That gap starts to increase. So that's where we start to see more and more students get identified. And that's you'd see that throughout the state, is that by that 4th or 5th grade, the curriculum gets harder, the content gets harder. You move out of basic instruction into now applying that information. And so it does increase the need for services, and so that's when you typically will start to evaluate students. That answer your question?
Yep. Stacy, is Team 1 part of this 206 in the high school?
No. Team 1 is a regular ed program,
Okay,
although we do
so-
put special education students in there.
Okay, so it's not, none of those students?
No, there may be some of that 206 on Team 1,
Okay,
but not necessarily all of those 206 would be.
all right, thank you.
And again, this kind of goes back to the concept that no matter who walks into our doors, we have to educate them. We don't have the ability to say, yep, we'll take you, but we're not going to take you like a private school does. So we have to educate those kids who come into 1st grade who are reading and those that have had no kindergarten. Kindergarten, again, we're required to offer kindergarten, but it's not mandatory for a parent to provide kindergarten. So a parent can choose never to send their kid to kindergarten. We've had them who come in who have no idea what the alphabet is. Okay, we have special ed students who come to us at that level. And then we have kids who are in 1st grade who are reading, who are voracious readers and can pick up maybe a chapter book. So a 1st grade teacher has to figure out how to do both. We have kids come to school ready to learn and those that don't. We have parents who prepare their child for school every day. They get up with them, they get them dressed, they get them ready to go to school. They make sure they have a good breakfast, they help them do their homework. And then we have parents who work 2 and 3 jobs, who the kids get shuffled off to the babysitter in the morning, they might get breakfast, they come to school, they might get lunch, they go home to the babysitter, they have nobody who sits and does their homework with them, they come into school next day not prepared because they haven't done their homework. We have to figure it all out. We have to educate them all. We have students that come from intact homes and from broken families. We have parents who have great support systems built in. Aunt and uncles and grandparents live right in the community. They help out. They're all raising the child. And then we have kids who come from broken families, and every other night they're shuffled between one parent's house and the other parent's house. I don't have my homework because it's at mom's house. That's where I was last night. We have to figure it all out. We have students that are gifted and those that struggle. The middle and high school, we've got kids who want to take AP classes, who want to take advanced courses. We've got kids who struggle just basic reading skills. They're all the same classes. We've got to figure it out. Again, going back, we have students who want to speak more than one language, and we have students who don't speak English. We offer French and Spanish at our middle school, which is a great program. We go into Latin at the high school, and then we have kids who don't even speak English. And then we educate from 3 to 21. For our special education population.
Stacy,
Yes.
since you've had this special education, it's been around for a number of years.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Has the cost, or has the money that the feds put up or send down increased or decreased? Or?
It probably has decreased, although I would say with ARA funds it increased just for 1 year. When the law was put into play, they told us that they would pay 40% of that. We have not even seen close to that. I would say we probably see 15, 16, 17%, if that. And in fact, at the state level, some of the aid programs that we get, such as catastrophic aid, which is for our students who cost the district a significant amount of money. So if we have a student who's out of district, who requires transportation, the state reimburses us when we get to a point that the cost of that child's education is 3.5 times the state average. So I think this year it's about $40-something thousand. When we get beyond that $40,000, let's say that's the mark, the state reimburses us 80% of those costs, okay, up to 10 times the amount, and at 10 times the amount, they reimburse 100%, okay? It's an aid program. We were getting that aid 3 years ago with budget cuts. That aid was reduced. This year we got 66% of what we were actually entitled to get.
You know, you mentioned that 40% reimbursement, and I know we haven't gotten it. And I remember, I think it was last year, there were 2 or 3 school districts, maybe around the Lakes region, who got together and actually sent the Department of Education a bill. Has anybody actually ever gotten their 40%?
No.
And it's not just statewide, right?
It's the country. We all get the same amount of federal aid that comes into, and that comes into us through what we call our IDEA and our preschool grants. And so that money comes in. You'll see that as revenue under grants. is that aid program, and that pays for us, like in Goffstown, it pays for several teachers' salaries. So we have some special ed salaries under there. It pays for, sometimes we need individualized, if a student needs an individual laptop for themselves, sometimes we'll pay for it out of that versus using the budget dollars. So we try to be creative with that.
I know we don't get the 40%, but is everybody getting an equal amount, whatever it is?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all proportioned out by the state based on our student population. It's also based on our number of students who are in compliance. So the Magic Day used to be December 1st. The Magic Day is now October 1st. And so we get credit for every student who's in compliance on October 1st, meaning they have an IEP in place, all their testing's up to date, all their paperwork's in order. If they're not in order, if it's not in order on October 1st, we don't get credit for that child, so we don't get funds for that child. So it's a really important date for us in special ed.
Stacey, I had a couple of things before you hit the educational thing. Is that all right, Dan? I tried to raise my hand, but you were.
I was standing in the way.
A couple of things. One, I'm wondering if you can get back to the budget committee at a later date, just for clarification on this student-teacher ratio, because I printed it off, and what you said was not really what it says in the footnote. So it says here total teachers is a full-time equivalent of teachers for grades 1 through 12, includes subject-specific teachers at all grade levels, as well as special ed and regular classroom teachers, and that the student-to-teacher ratio is not a measure of average class size. So it didn't say anything about administrators.
I can get back.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure on that. And the other thing that I thought is I try to make decisions based upon data. And one thing that you didn't mention, which I think is huge and is probably the reason why some people are in this room, and that is our valuation per pupil is, that's what hurts Goffstown. The state average equalized valuation per pupil, is $882,911. So that means for every kid that we have in the system, the average of amongst all towns and cities has $882,000 of tax base to support it. In Goffstown, it's almost 30% less. It's $619,927. So that means that we have to raise more money locally, and typically through residential property taxes, to pay for our education, whereas other towns, we might call them richer towns, they have more of a commercial industrial tax base, and it's not socking the residents. So we're caught in this big time pickle of trying to keep our local property taxes down, recognizing the fact that we are a bedroom community that's mostly residential. I think it's 92% residential. And where do we find that balance of saying, wait a second, the residential taxpayers can't take it anymore versus we don't have enough business to kind of offset it. And that is really the big thing, is that I think everybody wants a good education, but we are all people here trying to solve the problem. And part of solving the problem is an expense side. We know that. That's why the budget committee's here. The other part of it is how do we plan, how do we develop our town so that we can afford it, so it's not such a huge pressure on the residents. And I just wanted to make that clear. So I think I got some good feeling as to that we're competitive, we're average, on a lot of different things with expenses. In some cases we're lower, a lot lower in terms of our per pupil spending, but the big elephant in the room is that we do not have that equalized valuation per pupil at a number that makes us, in the game. And that's why it's so hard on residents. It's not like it's anybody's fault here. It's just that is what it is.
It is. Stacy, I do have one question. On your October, is it 1st, you have to have this data in?
Yes, for special education.
Yeah, how many students don't get funded because the information isn't in?
Oh, I think in the last couple of years we've been at 100%.
It is.
Every bit, yeah. We try very hard to make sure that happens. And I can confirm that with Brian, but I think pretty much at least when I was doing the role, and I think consistently we've been at just about 100%.
All right, thank you.
So the next thing I want to jump into is a little bit of what we do and how we think we're doing at what we do. There's always that big kind of piece of the puzzle of we're a school in need of improvement, we're a district in need of improvement, would insinuate that we're not doing well. We think that we have been doing well. We look at our NECAP, which is the state assessment, which is what we're assessed on. That's how we became a school in need of improvement. That's how we became a district in need of improvement. So last year, Goffstown High School made AYP. What we did was we stepped back and said, we know our kids know what they're doing. We know we're providing a good education to our students in this community. We have to figure out how to get them to do better on our test. And so So we put some incentives in there. We really motivated them. We, as administrators, we as teachers, took it much more seriously, and we said we need to show, because it impacts a whole lot of things. It requires us, as a school in need of improvement, we have to portion some of our Title I monies to required professional development. They start diverting our funds and using the money the way the state thinks we should use it when we don't make these things. So we said we need to take this more seriously. Not that we weren't taking it seriously, but we need to think about it, we need to work with it. So as an SAU, we really took to task 2 years ago and said, we're going to focus. So we spent a summer retreat really thinking about NEPAP and what we can do. And I think our scores increased significantly at the high school. And one of the things I want to talk about is the fact that while the high school scores improved, that tells me that all of our schools have improved, because we test in 11th grade, the beginning of 11th grade, that covers the material for 10th grade. So you're testing in the fall of the year after the material is supposed to have been taught. What this tells me is kids didn't all of a sudden in 10th grade learn the materials. They've been learning it all along. Okay, we just haven't figured out how to get the younger kids to take the test more seriously. We worked on that again this summer. We're hoping that our NECAP scores continue to improve, and you'll see those scores improve with the new testing we just did in the fall. But in 2009, Goffstown High School in our reading scored at the 95th percentile for the state. Okay, so each one of those little bars represents a school district, a high school. As you can see, 3 schools scored better than us: Hollis Brookline High School, Sunapee High School, and Hanover High School. As I've said many times, I'm not embarrassed to be associated with those school districts. There's some pretty high-ranking schools, and it's pretty nice that we scored within those, just underneath them.
Stacy, one of the questions that I get is those 4 quadrants. There's proficient with distinction, the highest level, the proficient, and then there's, I don't know what the other 2 are, but it's below proficient.
Yeah, but it's 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Okay, 4, 3, 2, and 1. This is a scaled score which takes all of that into consideration.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So
but why is it that, I guess my question is, and it was raised this week in the paper, why is it that, we can be that high, but when you look at the proficient and higher, it's at, don't quote me on it, isn't it somewhere like 60 or 70%? And then the rest is below that?
Yeah,
no?
I didn't bring all the testing stuff, but this takes then all of the schools and puts them on equal footing with the score. So in the law, based on the law, in 2014, 100% of our students are supposed to be a proficient. Okay, that means every student in 2014, no matter if you have a disability, no matter if you're an overachiever, underachiever, you are supposed to be proficient. You'll be on grade level. I don't know anybody in this room who can say 100% of your child will be on grade level for everything by that point in time. I can't say it as a superintendent. We try our darndest and we try our best to make sure that happens, and we provide services, but I can't guarantee that every child's going to be as motivated as every other child to get there, that every child has the same background and experiences and home situations to get there. So what this does is this takes kind of we're at the 95th percentile for our scaled score comparative to all the other school districts. Right. So then what we did was we looked at, going back to that cost per pupil, what do those other school districts pay? Again, this is the Department of Ed's cost per pupil. What do those school districts pay on average for their students? So as you can see, our number, and again, that number is different than the original number because this is now just looking at high school scores, not the district cost per pupil. So we pay significantly less than those schools to get those scores. If we look at writing, again, Bedford High School, Hollis Brookline, and Co-Brown scored higher than us. Again, not 3 bad schools to be associated with. I like to know that we score just as good as Bedford. And what do they pay cost per pupil? Again, 11,000, almost 12, 10.5, and 13,000 compared to Goffstown's 9,800, just under 10,000. And our math, again, math is a tough area for everybody. 7 school districts scored higher, or 6 school districts scored higher than us. Hanover, Hollis Brookline, Bedford, Bow, Oyster River, and Sunapee. Lisbon scored equal with us. So again, we scored at the 92nd percentile in comparison. And again, the cost comparatives for those school districts. I think in Goffstown we get a really good bang for our buck for our students and their performance. I think our students are learning. I think they are there. So while you'll often hear we're a school in need of improvement, we're a district in need of improvement, it's a specific population of our special education that gets us that determination, not the students in general. I think in general, our students are learning and performing, and we're doing it for a really reasonable rate. This is an old slide, and actually I tried to come over here yesterday because I heard that Scott had an updated slide on annual income in your presentation. But again, this was the last census data that I had. You can refer back to Scott's slides for current information. This is just the tax rate from 2009. I don't have the 2010 on there, but in 2009, your tax rate compared to those same districts, so you can kind of get comparative data as where those districts fall. And then what I did was I pulled out the historical tax rate over the last 10 years. And hopefully those numbers are not too small on your spreadsheets, but again, this is just your historical tax rate. So in 2000, and certainly I know that things change over time. We've probably had an evaluation throughout those years. But in general, in 2000, your tax rate was 28.43. Your current tax rate in 2009 was, or 2009 tax rate was 21.67.
If I could, I mean, I've gotten a ton of feedback from citizens about the tax rate, and the tax rate is what the tax rate is. It's all based upon the assessments. And I try to share with people, take a look at your tax bills. What is the net that you pay? And I've done analysis on it, and I'll be glad to share it with anybody. I talked to Sarah at the newspaper. Hopefully maybe we can run a story on it. But take a look at the bottom line of what you're paying on your tax bill, because as your assessments go up and down, the tax rate goes kind of up and down and all over the place. And what I've seen is that over the last 5 years, since going back to 2006 to 2010, it's been fairly stable, within about 5% increase from 2005 to 2010. And I've run the data on different properties. I've run it on myself. I've run it on some of you guys just to see where it's at. And the numbers are what the numbers are. So when you look at the tax rate, you'll see it going up and down and all over the place, but take a look at what your bottom line is, and you'll see that it's been pretty stable overall. And then even if you want, we can even get you data going back earlier. And I've done that too. I've gone back as far as with the tax assessor back to 1992, 1997, 1999 to see what are the trends looking at.
And so Scott, if people wanted to get that information, they could go to town hall, and would they be able to?
I'm going to try to get it. I'm going to try to get it so that we have like a spreadsheet or a calculator where if you plug in your assessments, we'll be able to have the local ed, all the different tax rates for all the years, and you just plug in your assessment to see what it is. And then people can kind of figure it out on their own. And the town does have the historical assessments for properties too.
Great. I just want to point out, because I think it's the next slide, or maybe one slide after that, one of the things to remember is that you pay two different education taxes. You pay your local education tax and your state education tax. The state education tax is set by the Department of Education, or Revenue Probably Services does it. And then your other local is your local tax. That makes up it. The reason I'm telling you that is, I'm going to go back to this one. How is education funded in this state? It is basically funded by your local taxation. 56% of education is funded by your local tax. 34% comes from your adequacy aid. That's that number for many of you who have seen in the recent news where adequacy is falling, whether it's you've heard probably the color. What has happened is when the lawsuits came about for how to fund an adequate education, they were taxed with figuring out what that looks like, what an adequate education is, how to fund it, what pays for it, and then how to be accountable for it. So they've gone through the process. The last piece of it was how to be accountable for it. We had to this summer spend time looking at every piece of an adequate education and documenting how we provide that for the state. One of the interesting pieces of adequacy aid is that a portion of that, approximately 20%, is your state education tax. So you can say adequacy is something different, but it really comes back to about 20% of that piece really should be under local taxation. So if you look at that and say 70%, just say as a round number, is from local taxation, of course our taxes go up. If we don't have a huge tax base, it's the property, it's the residents who are paying your education tax. It is what it is. 1% comes from tuition, food, and local revenue, 3% from other state aid, and 6% from federal sources. So the bulk of how we fund education is through local taxation. Okay, so now when we start to talk about kind of getting into the budget, what have we done to reduce our budget and expenses? We've really spent a lot of time looking at how we can do things differently. We've looked at staff and faculty reductions over the last 3 years, at least since I've been superintendent. We have reduced faculty and staff. We, several years ago, contracted with Honeywell to look at cost savings for our buildings, and those, I believe, I don't have the number in front of me, but we've had about $200,000 cost savings, right? Does that sound about right? Over the years of those programs. We started up several new programs, about 205,000. We've started up several new programs. One of the things that is always kind of one of those back and forth pieces, we received ARA money. One of the things we did with that money was to start some new programs that we felt we needed. You'll see those programs in our budget now because ARA money's not there. However, what it does is it's a cost savings to the district because what we were able to do was keep students in district by developing those programs, not now spending the money to send those students out of district. So we started 2 new programs at Bartlett Elementary School, one for our lower functioning students, so our students with low functioning autism, those students who, 3rd or 4th grade who don't walk, don't talk, are in wheelchairs, we need to educate those students. And then we started a program for our more behavioral kind of students. Previous to those programs, if those kids we couldn't handle in school, we'd send them out of district. An out-of-district program on average is about $50,000 to $60,000. That doesn't include if they need therapies, they need services, or they need a one-to-one aid. We have kids who could potentially have $100,000, $125,000 placements, easy. Then you look at transportation, which could cost you between $50 and $100 a day, depending on where that program is. So, for example, our one program at Bartlett, we have a teacher and an aide in that program at approximate cost of probably about $80,000. It only takes one student to go out of district to make up that, to outweigh that cost. So bringing the programs into district is a cost saving. So we were able to do that. We've been really creative with our use of our grants. One of the things you'll see in the budget, we reduced our professional development line significantly. And we're looking to access our grants and apply for more competitive grants. The problem with the Department of Ed right now is their grants are going much more competitively. It used to be everybody got a portion of it. Now they've all gone competitive. Last year, their technology grants went competitive. You could apply for up to $150,000. It used to be that we'd get a portion of that automatically, that you just had to apply it to technology. That has now gone to a competitive grant. We applied for it, we didn't get it. Unfortunately, they always weight them to the school districts who have need. And so it gets tougher and tougher. The other side is we don't have a person who writes grants. We fit it in between everything else we do. So it makes it a little difficult. We've also refinanced our current bond, our bond at for the middle and high school. For the high school. We refinanced that bond, refunded it at a significantly lower rate. It's about a $580,000 savings over the rest of that life of the bond. It cost us nothing to do. It cost us but all that's included. Any of those expenses to refinancing the bond. We didn't extend the bond. We just refinanced it at a lower rate, and we're able to save money. So you'll see that savings throughout the next 10 years that we're paying that bond off. We also request parents to increase contributions. The supply list that we ask parents to bring in the beginning of the year, I think, grows every year. 10 years ago, I bet it was 2 or 3 things. Now it's a list. We've asked our PFTs, our parent-teacher groups, our PTOs, our MVPs, to contribute more and more and more. This year, PFT, and we thank them, they contributed instead of asking parents for lists because we knew the economy was tight for people and the lists have grown. The PFT donated, I believe it was just about $600 per teacher for a grade to pay for those costs. So other groups have stepped up and put towards those kinds of things. So we're asking more and more of those groups to help us out. And we also negotiated, Ray and I negotiated for all 3 school districts a very competitive 5-year bus contract, which will, you'll see some of the cost savings of that in the budget. So we actually, what we did was we went out and negotiated 2 contracts. We used to have the Goffstown Truck Center, used to do our regular education, transportation, and special education. We went out to bid, offering to split those services out. We were able to come back with a special ed provider that was significantly reduced costs. So you'll actually see a cost savings in our budget this year for special ed transportation. So that gives you kind of a flavor of some of the things that we've done. We've also used ARA funds for a lot of things that have helped us. For example, we were able to buy the reading program with that, Reading Streets for the elementary, for K to 6. We were able to put in video cameras. We put in video cameras at Mountain View and video cameras at the high school. With those, we had some at the high school, we had none at Mountain View, so we were able to do that piece of it, and that helps with safety and security of our buildings. We bought some computers for both Mountain View and our Alt Ed program. So we were able to use grants as opposed to the budget for pretty creative ways to make that happen. Just as a review, just so the question has come up, you know, well, what have we cut? These are positions, live people that we have cut in the budget. Now, when I say we cut them, it means that somebody else has picked up their work. Their work didn't go away. So last year we cut 1.5 secretaries. We cut a secretary at Mountain View and we cut a part-time secretary at Bartlett. That work doesn't go away. It just means somebody else has picked it up and works twice as hard now. So last year in the budget for this year, we cut 1.5 secretaries, 1 paraeducator, and 5.9 teachers. I have heard that people say, well, nobody really lost their job. People did lose their job. A PE teacher lost their job. An administrator lost their job. A secretary lost their job. They are no longer employed. We had a PE teacher and we had an art teacher that we said, we appreciate your many years of service. We had a PE teacher that I believe had been here for 6 or 7 years. That is no longer employed with us because we didn't have another position to shift them. And we tried to shift as many people as we could into open positions, but there were some people who did lose their job over that. In 2009 and 2010, we cut half a secretary, we cut 1 administrator, 2 teachers, and 5 paraeducators. So that's on top of any additional cuts we made. That was just staffing. If you remember in the 9-10 budget, we cut 25% of our supply lines, 50% of our dues and fees lines, and so there were other additional cuts on top of those. Okay.
Yeah, Stacy, you mentioned the PE teacher and the art teacher. Were any of the teacher positions vacant that were eliminated?
No.
They were all, okay.
Yep.
Were they all layoffs? Retirements?
We had some, what we tried to do was shift some people. So for example, in that 5.9, like we had a special ed teacher, but we were able to shift a position and move them around. The PE teacher was a position that we identified we could cut, and other people could pick up those components of that position. So that person was employed with us, is no longer employed with us. They lost their job through a RIF, reduction in force.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Because a PE teacher is a PE teacher. They're not we couldn't move them into a 3rd grade position where, like, if we had, like, for example, we had a retirement at Maple Ave.
Mm-hmm.
We actually reduced a teacher, I believe it was at Bartlett. We reduced a teacher at Bartlett. That teacher ended up going to Maple Ave, so she didn't lose her job. We reduced a position, but she didn't lose her job. The PE teacher lost her job.
Okay, so how many lost their jobs?
A PE teacher and an art teacher.
2.
Lost an administrator.
And an administrator the year before, yeah, lost her job. There was not another position to
But
shift
2
her.
teachers lost their job?
Right.
2, okay. So the 5.9,
Again, there's positions we eliminated, but the people who were in those positions we were able to shift into other
Okay.
positions.
all right, so this is
through
really
attrition.
is positions, not teachers.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
There are positions we eliminated out of the budget.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Kind of where have costs gone? I tried to look, and actually I had gone to a workshop the other day and they had given us some figures on retirement, and they had gone all the way back to 2004, which is why 2004 is kind of the standard. What I tried to do was pull out some numbers of things that we have to provide. We don't, so retirement contributions in 2004 were 2.64%. they're currently in the 11-12 budget, 9.07%. Health insurance, the cost in 2004 for a single HMO Matthew Thornton plan was $5,127. It's currently $9,132. Oil was 87 cents a gallon. It's now $2.68 a gallon. Electricity was $4.07 a kilowatt. It's now $9.04 a kilowatt. Transportation, regular education, we were paying $172 a day or $4,000 a bus. We're currently paying $226 a day or $5,400 a bus. Special education transportation, we were at $143 a day. We're now at $194 a day. So it just kind of gives you some points of reference to show, yeah, things have gone up. Of course, our budget goes up because things go up, costs go up.
The bottom line, you had mentioned we got a favorable contract for special education busing.
Yep.
What would it have been then had we not gotten the favorable price?
Well, I didn't bring the numbers with me, but
$20 per day.
per day, yeah, I can tell you the provider we were using, the cost per day was about $20 more than what we're getting now. They were exceptionally higher than what we were able to bring in and negotiate a contract.
I think Ray said, I didn't quite hear what Ray said, was it?
$220.
$220.
Yeah. So we were actually paying, we would have paid significantly more than that.
Stacy, can you please explain or say a little more why the retirement contribution percentage is such a big increase?
Yep, and that is likely through the next couple of years, from what I hear, is going to continue to increase. And in general, the 32nd version, and I'm not the retirement guru, would be
Well,
that.
if you'd like, Stacy, I'll take
Would
that
you like
piece.
to take that one off?
I can't actually, because there's two pieces of this. When in my job at the state as a business supervisor, helping the agencies run their budgets, one of the things I was responsible for was watching the retirement system and how they do the contribution rates. Back then, when the accounting was done the way it was, the way it happened was as the employees were stably putting in 5%. Whatever they were making in investments, the difference in the total calculation to fund the retirement system then went to the employers. And the state picked up a piece of it. Now, there were two components of what was going on. As the interest rates on the earnings, on the funds, started to drop, then that rate started to go up. Then the state, a year or two ago, said, wait a minute, why are we funding so much for the locals, and shifted that cost down to us. Yep. And so that's a double whammy for the towns. Not only, in hindsight, the legislators may have been more responsible for keeping the rate for employees and employers at a stable 5% and let the fund grow to 100%, but it didn't. The employers got a real great deal for a decade, less than the employees. And now we're paying for it, is really what's happening. Does that help, John?
It does.
Okay.
Just follow up. The percentage is a percentage of what we're paying per salary or per the whole budget?
Salary.
Per salary.
Okay.
Yep. So that kind of just gives you an idea of kind of where costs have gone for us. And then, so here's kind of what did we, Dan, do you want to take a break? That's a good point to,
If,
I don't know if people
you
are-
have about a half hour more to go. Does anybody want to take a break now or take it around 11?
Let's go halfway.
Let's go another little bit if that's okay.
So what did we budget when we looked at the budget for this year? We did get our guaranteed maximum rate for health insurance. So you'll actually see places in the budget where it actually shows the GMR and then a decrease. When we had originally budgeted, when we started the budget process, we hadn't gotten the GMR, and we had budgeted at 17.5, which is an average over the last couple of years. We got our GMR, which came in at 11.1, so we've made that reduction in the budget. Our current increase for this year was 15.5, so we're hoping that it'll even be lower than 11.1, but we won't know that for a while. Dental insurance, we budgeted at 5%. Our current increase was 5.5. Retirement, again, there's your retirements. Oil, we budgeted at 268, which you saw on the last slide. We're currently paying 238. One of the things, again, for cost savings, we're looking to see if we can get any of our provider to go a multi-year, as opposed to we've been going out to bid with the school district, the town, Dunbarton and New Boston, the school districts and the town, as a kind of a consortium to try to save as much money as we can by buying more in bulk. So we're looking to see if any of those providers will go a 2-year contract for an even cheaper rate. So Ray's been working on that project. Electricity, PSNH has told us to budget about a 6% increase. Propane, we budgeted at 174, our current price is at 169. And then salary and benefits, so the teacher's contract expires in 2012, so next year we'll be negotiating that contract. We're currently negotiating our support staff contract, which covers our paraeducators, our secretaries, custodians, and kitchen workers. We're negotiating that, so you'll see in the budget there's been no salary increase for them. If you see increases in those lines, it's just because their staff changed, and so somebody's either making more or less money. So that will be as a warrant article. You'll see that as a warrant article coming up once we get that contract resolved.
So if I look at the total of the GESS worksheet that we got for salaries, I'm not sure if I can actually find it. But if I was able, it almost looks like 3,126,190, but I'm not so sure. I think it is, but that's only 111, not 221. Forgive me, but I haven't gotten a chance to really analyze it. Maybe Ray can help. Do we know what? Here's my question. Maybe you can answer it. I'm looking for the total cost because what I want to see was what's not in the budget, and I would look at the total salaries, and if there was a 1% increase, what that would cost. If there was a 2%, and then I could work it through there. That's all I'm trying to find out.
So if you pulled out all your, and we'll get this to you electronically if we haven't already.
I think I have that salary schedule that I'm looking at, but I haven't.
Yep, if you pulled all the 111 lines, that's your salary lines.
That is the 2212, because I haven't understood, and that is the number I said.
That's your salary lines. Your 211 would be your health insurance.
That's what I thought. Okay, 3126,190.
Yep.
Okay, a little over $3 million.
Yep.
Okay.
And so we're negotiating heavily with them right now.
Yep.
We're in process.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the budget for this year. So here's some overview numbers. So the current budget, now this is, I did it in two ways. One is the top number is your budget including grants and food service. Okay. Your Fund 10 is only your general budget. So that's kind of the budget you have in front of you with all the detail in it. Okay. So the current full budget is $35,627,393. The proposed 11-12 school year budget is $37,481,820. It's a 5.21% increase. Now, if you look at your grants and your, I don't know if you have the grants, but you have the food service budget. There's been an increase in that. I believe we'll get to that at some point, but it's about a 20% increase. The new food service director has really spent some real time with the budget and has really more accurately reflected what the provisions are. Remember, both your grants and your food service are enterprise funds, so we can only spend what we get. We can't spend more in grants than we get in, so it's pretty much a wash. You'll see that number in the budget, and then you'll see it in revenues. When you look at the Fund 10 only budget, okay, which is kind of the 200 and something page document you have in front of you, last year's budget was $34,161,162. The proposed budget is $35,710,024, or an increase of 4.53%.
Stacy, just to clarify, the Fund 10 is commonly referred to as
The general fund,
budget.
correct. So taking that information, I couldn't fit it all on one side. When you look at the salary and benefit factor in the budget, because we cut that budget, but because of the significant increase in salary and benefits, it doesn't look like it. So when you look at it, for comparatives, let's look at the Fund 10 only budget. Salary and benefits for 10 and 11 encompass $24,547,168. For the 11 and 12 budget, it's $26,493,392. So there's been an increase of 7.93% in salary and benefits. So for us to have gone to the 4.53%, we've cut other stuff. We can't cut salary and benefits, and that's an obligation we have. We have to provide it. And so those are comparative, so you can kind of see we've cut other stuff besides salary and benefits.
You mentioned Fund 10 as general fund.
General fund.
Correct.
What's the rest?
The rest is food service and grants.
Okay.
And federal grants,
Yep.
which I will ask for if you guys had that electronically, if we can get that as well, so we can take a peek. And I don't think we got it on paper either, did we?
No, because the board hasn't
Didn't
gotten
see
it
it.
yet. We're
Okay.
doing that on Monday.
Right.
So I'm going to talk about the 10% question. And I put it out there as a 10% question. because it's kind of been the hot button, so I thought I'd address it. So the board did not ask me to do a 10% reduction in our budget. They did not ask me to calculate what I would cut out of the budget, but what I did do was to just take a look and say, what would a 10% reduction over the current proposed budget? And so if you see different numbers, it's because what I calculated was taking a 10% reduction off of our current budget, but then I also added in the increase of what we're asking for this year's budget, which comes up with a 4964 number. Okay? That's where I got that number.
I'm not following that.
What I did was, so I interpreted a 10% reduction over the current year's budget.
Which is 3.5.
But then I said, well, it doesn't make sense to give that number because we're not asking for this year's number, we're asking for a new number. So I added that number plus the
That would be 3.7.
I added, so the 10% off of this year's budget.
3.5.
Plus the $1.9 million increase we're asking for next year's budget.
So your $5 million is what you would reduce from your request to the budget committee in order, so it's taking the page, so the actual reduction is closer to 3.5 or whatever that is.
Off of this year's current budget.
Off what you're, correct, but you would say, from the budget you sent to us, you'd have to reduce another $5 million from the request to get to what the budget committee was kind of looking at, what would it look like if we had that number? Yeah.
Correct. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what that looks like is, in general, if I took Maple Lab's budget and Glen Lake's budget, now it's a little bit more than that. It's a couple $100,000, but not much. You'll get the general idea. And what that means. So then what I did was I just took, in general, what's in those budgets. It's 48 teachers, 3 administrators, 17 paraeducators, 4 secretaries, 3.5 custodians, a part-time technician, $13,000 in water costs, $95,000 in maintenance costs, those are building maintenance, $20,000 in electricity, $18,000 in propane, $42,000 in oil, $73,000 in books and student supplies, $14,000 in phone. You kind of get the idea of what that would look like. We'd basically have to shift Maple Lab and Glen Lake to another building and figure that out. So it kind of gives you an idea of what that would mean for us.
Stacy,
Yes.
not to put Philip on the spot here, but he wrote a letter and said 20 teachers, and you have 48.4. I'm going to assume, kind of like, God, when we did it on the town side, we had this whole fiscal year thing, which you don't have, but I would think that you have to lay off an inverse order of employment. Is that how you get to that number?
This number I got, the difference between Philip's number and my number was Philip didn't add in this year's budget. So the increase, which makes the difference. I did not. What I did was I just kind of went. The average, right. What I did was I went with, we're cutting Maple Ave and Glen Lake in general. I was, if we had to rip teachers.
To illustrate a point.
To illustrate a point. I just counted how many teachers we have employed at Glen Lake and Maple Ave.
Okay.
So that's all that number is.
But the reality of it is that if you have 200 educators and it was a 10% reduction, one would think 20, but that's not accurate because that's the average teacher pay. You'd have to go in the first in, first out, and they're probably making 32 or something to start. So you would need more than 20, so the number is probably more like 30 or 35.
I mean, you can say the average teacher's salary and benefits package is $60,000, but that's likely not the teacher we're getting rid of. That's an average teacher. We're getting rid of the lowest. We like you just said, last in is first out. So it's typically we've been hiring a bachelor step 1 teacher whose starting salary is I think 31 maybe this year, and so yes, it takes more of them than a $60,000 teacher who's had 20 years of experience. So that number is just strictly who's employed at Maple Ave and Bartlett to get to that number.
Okay.
Maple Ave and Bartlett or Maple Ave and...
I mean Maple Ave and Glen Lake, you're correct. So then what I did was I pulled out some information from the state, kind of where the state spends on average, and so this is taking the total cost. These are your MS-27 lines, where they spend their money proportionately. So these are percentages. The numbers on the side are percentages. Kind of where the state spends their money and where we spend our money. So as you can see, we spend a little bit more in regular education, a little bit less in vocational programs. But on average, remember, it's only 5 points in between the two. One of the things I want to point out is I've heard a lot about, we have too much school administration. If you look at the school administration and business, that is, the state average is just a little above 5, and so are we. I think there's about a 0.3 percentage point of what we spend on administration compared to the state. So we're not off.
Could we get
as
that
far as-
data? I mean, because the state does have theirs, and I know that's,
Yeah.
I would be curious because they do break it down, and they say that 41.4% is regular ed, 18.9 is special. I'd be curious to see where our district lies in comparison to that.
Yeah, we can get those. I mean, it's the MS-27.
It's I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it's pretty
Correct, right?
easy
Those are the
exercise.
categories that are used. So that just kind of gives you I mean, there's nothing on there that stands out as significant that we're spending more or less. It's a percentage point here or there. Okay, now I'm going to go school by school review. And remember, so if you are looking at your budgets, all the lines that start with 000 are district, 101's Bartlett, et cetera, so you have that reference. So you kind of know where you're starting.
Excuse me, Dan, was this breaking point, or?
I'm thinking this might be a good breaking point.
Absolutely.
What I like to do, Andrew, is we're going to go in recess for maybe 5 or 6 minutes. If everybody knows what happens when we do this is the video stays on and they turn off the mics. So if you want to make hand gestures to the cameras, they will see you. They won't hear you. No hand gestures. Thank you. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
thank you.
All
You know,
All right, thank you, everyone. We are back. We are live. We're live. We're back on. Well, thank you. We're going to continue. Stacy is going to go. She has a few slides on each one of the schools. If we spent about half an hour on each school or no more, we're going to continue this on Tuesday. Depending on what happens, we'll try to go with the flow. Scott?
Yeah, I just had one quick public service announcement.
Sure, go ahead.
Which you said I could stay. Tonight at 6:30 at Stark Hall next door is Once Upon a Pie. Residents have baked pies and there's award-winning pies, etc. It's $1 a slice and $1 for a cup of coffee. It's a great event. But most importantly, at the end of the night, you get to throw pies in people's faces. I have volunteered to do it. Sarah, I'm not sure if you...
What time? What time? How much?
Sarah, I think you could get some money. Members of the budget committee, listen. We have been talking about cutting budgets, right? Okay? This is your time to put your face up. Okay? We can raise some money for the library, Friends of the Library. It's a good cause. It's at 6:30. I will be there. And I expect that many of you will too. And if I can recruit you for the pie in the face, I might open up my checkbook as well.
Your wife told you to say this, didn't she?
That is true. Thank you, Dan.
She's going to be the highest bidder.
7:30.
The only thing I want to mention as well is this is a combined meeting of the budget committee and the school board, the school staff. I noticed earlier there may have been some of the public that was interested in asking questions, but I can't take them at the moment. We'll have a public session on Tuesday. If you'd like to come on Tuesday, we'd be most welcome to hear what you have to say. Thank you. Thank you. Please feel free at your leisure. Stacy.
Okay. So now we're actually going to get into the budget. What I've done is I've broken down the budget into the 5 schools and then the district. So you'll see different portions of each, which is how your budget is broken down when you look at it. The first section is the district, which is your 000 lines. Okay, so anything that starts with those lines are your district budget. I just want to remind you, this is not the SAU budget. A lot of people, the SAU budget is within those lines, but a lot of people confuse it. These are lines that are attributed to district level positions, such as our facilities director, our technology director, those kinds of things that touch all of our schools, not just one. So when you look at the district budget, the current budget is $7,607,560. The 11-12 proposed budget is $7,320,583, or a decrease of $286,977. Decrease of 3.77%. Now, for each one, I also then kind of put in what is attributable to salary and benefits. Because again, as I said earlier, that's been our biggest increase in our budget. So salary portion of that budget is $1,000,009 and change. The proposed budget is $2.3 million and change. So it's a difference of $357,000. So obviously, on top of salary and benefits, we've cut other areas to be able to get that. So salary.
What areas how did you get to
I'm going to talk about that. So here's what. So we had no new staff requests at the district level. So here are some of the cuts that we made, some of the increases. So what I tried to do was go through and pull out where significant increases or decreases were. You may see $100 or $200, but I tried to pull out the more significant ones. So in 1,200, which are your special ed lines, 111, that's salary. You'll see a salary and benefit increase in those lines. That's the 2 new programs that we developed at Bartlett that I talked about earlier. They had been funded through ARA, which has allowed us to start the programs to keep those kids in district. Again, it has a cost savings benefit. Right now in each of the programs, we have at least 3 students. So if those 6 students had to go out of district, it would have been a significant cost on top of that. The 1,200-321 line, we had a significant increase in tutoring of $16,200. We're required, if our special ed or regular ed students get hospitalized or require tutoring, we are required to provide that. If you look at the budget, I believe that line was 0 budgeted this year. And so we budgeted it for next year knowing that we have the need. the 1,200, and I kind of gapped these three together, 561, 564, and 339. Those are our out-of-district programs and our consultant fees that we use. So 561 is out-of-district for public schools. So, for example, if we tuition a student into another district, 564 is private school. So if we tuition a student into a private school, these would be all special ed students. So, for example, we have a couple of students at Lighthouse School in Massachusetts. That would fall under the 564. And then the 339 are our consulting lines. So if we need to bring in a consultant to work with one of our students, an autism specialist, something like that, to help us with a student to keep them in district, in general, that line has decreased by a couple $100,000. And I put the three together because there's been some shifting of things, so it was hard to say here's where that decrease was. If you remember last year, that was one of the areas that we had significant dollars left in our budget, was in out-of-district placements. Because we had developed so many programs, we were able to keep kids in, and so we really cut those lines back. The downside of doing that is we left little wiggle room. So we budgeted for exactly what students we know are out of district. That means that at any given time, we could have 3 or 4 or 5 students move into district that are out of district. So a student moves in from Manchester, even though we have a program, if they're already out of district, we have to work to get them back into district. We don't just say, well, we have a program, so you come back here. We have to meet, you have a process to go through. So that line was one of the biggest significant decreases. Under guidance, we had an increase, and that's a part-time counselor that links with the 2 new programs. And she's in the district line because she's helping us out at both the elementary schools and the middle school. She works with our kind of behavioral students, helping us to maintain our programs, making sure our staff have training, as well as providing consistency between our buildings for that program. We had a significant reduction in professional development. I think we brought it down to about $25,000. I think it had been budgeted a couple years ago at over $100,000. And again, we're going to try to utilize grants to do that, as opposed to budget dollars. We had a slight reduction in school board. The board voted not to take any salary increases, and we reduced the senior barbecue. We've been doing it a couple years now, so we have a better feel for where our costs are. So we did reduce that as far as the school board line goes. Audit services, we had a slight increase based on our additional audit needs. We're going to go out to bid this year. The state recommends that we go out to bid for our audit services every so many years to make sure, one, that we're competitive, but also that different auditors are looking at our books, that it's not the same auditor all the time, so that you can make sure your audits are valid and reliable. So we will go out to bid for our services. The other piece is that with the ARA funds, it requires us to do a little bit of an additional audit. We have to now audit the ARA funds grant, so that will be an extra cost, so we have a slight increase there. And then legal, we have a slight increase due to the cost of our legal expenses, the number of arbitrations that we've had with the teachers union, as well as next year we will be negotiating our teachers contract, so we anticipate many more legal fees associated with that. Right now we're doing our support staff with no attorney present. We're working on doing it ourselves with consultation, but with the teachers contract we will likely need to have an attorney present, so it will increase those costs, so we did increase those budget lines.
Is the 000 take care of all expenditures for the school attorney?
Yes, because it would be either.
No, he said no.
We have special education budget lines.
But isn't that in the 000?
In each school?
Special ed's in 0002.
Would be in, but in a 1200
function, right, but it's still in 00.
Yes.
So
They're
there's
all in
2 places
000.
you'll see it. You'll see it in for regular ed, and then you'll see it in a 1200 line for
Right.
special ed. But
Well, I
all
had a
in the
question. One of the budget committee members had asked me because they noticed that the attorney was present at I think it was the deliberative session?
Yep.
And would that have come out of one of the 000 line for his presence
Yeah,
there?
it would have either come out of, and without knowing, it would either have come out of the school board line, or it would have come out of that legal line.
Okay, the school board line
I don't have the bill in front of me.
2311 someplace? Okay, well, I'll,
2318 is the function.
okay, great. That's where it probably would have come out had it, okay, thank you.
Another reduction, we had a decrease of $26,445 at the SAU. That's the SAU assessment. based on some shifting of student population. As you know, both Goffstown, Dunbarton, and New Boston pay a proportionate share based on your student population. We've also done some reductions in our budget at the SAU. We've looked at some cost-saving measures. We've reduced a couple of staff positions and hours to make that, and so there's an overall cost reduction of $26,000 at the SAU. Facilities, we have a slight increase in our temporary help. This would be for our maintenance support. Facilities is one of those interesting things. When a custodian calls in sick, we need to fill that. We need to have somebody in there because the buildings, somebody needs to empty the garbages, somebody needs to clean our bathrooms. That all has to happen. So we've just found we've consistently overspent in that line, and so we want to fund it based on what our historical usage has been. And then on the 27, 21, and 22, those are our transportation lines. One's regular ed and one's special ed. The regular ed line is generally level funded, and of course that's a great thing because it hasn't gone up, and that's based on our new contract. And we've had a significant decrease in special ed, again based on what we were able to negotiate for our contract. And so that's kind of just an overview of the ups and downs of the district lines, and I guess I can answer questions that people might have.
Let me start with a general question, Stacy, and it might involve Ray. The June statements we received showed total expenditures for the general fund for the 2009-2010 fiscal year of $30,257,715 and 37 cents. Were there more adjustments, do you remember, to that number, given what happened? I'm looking for that actual number because a lot of times what we do is I don't necessarily look between budget to budget because we look at budget and it was budgeted for $3,000 but we only spent $1,000. There's got to be a reason for that. But if it's budgeted next year at $2,500 and we call it a $500 reduction, it's actually a potential $1,000 more than what we spent, and there's got to be a reason for that. I know you said we did a zero-based budgeting and move our way up, so there's some benefit to looking at this.
Yeah.
But I also want to look at expenses in the same lines as, so I can do that kind of comparison.
Yeah.
And I
and
need a
there's
good base to start
and
that with.
there's some places where looking at historical spending absolutely works.
In 1200
in some
it doesn't
places
well.
it doesn't work because it's like the 1200 with special ed is so student specific that if you had a student come in, historical spending doesn't tell you anything. Legal is another area that historically doesn't really give you a good capture because you could have one good lawsuit that could blow that whole budget. So, it could make it look like it was really high. When you look at student supplies or prints, when we put out, we need 147 Reading Street's books at $3.72. That's a pretty good cost, and that's a pretty good historical number to know what we're spending on those lines. So there's some that historical spending really works well, and some that it just logistically doesn't make sense to look at it because it's an up and down situation. So you're looking for what that accurate number from June was?
Yeah, I want to
or
find
closing
out
our
if
books
there was a report, because we get our monthly reports from, and Ray, I got to tell, it's pretty impressive. It's like usually maybe the third day of the month, maybe even earlier, we can kind of run that, so that shows a good handle on that. If there were further issuance of a June final, so to speak.
Get back to your question, though. The number that you're looking at is what had actually been expended at the close of the year.
Encumbrances.
About the encumbrances
Yes.
that are carried forward
Right.
to address obligations that hadn't been paid for during that fiscal period then. So to answer your question, I think if we look at a DOE 25 report, which is the statement of record, that's for the fiscal year. That's usually prepared in the September timeframe and submitted to the state. It also becomes the basis of the financial reporting that's put out by our independent auditors. Those are the number sets that I think you would want to look at by function, by account, and that'll give you a true feel for what was spent for each of those areas.
Right. What was coming forward was close to 1.8 million of encumbrances at the end of the year on that report. And how many of those, ballpark figure, how much do you think was realized and how much?
I'll be able to tell you that at the end of this month because that's when we close the books on that.
We're still in November now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
A significant amount of that was taken
Guys, you have questions on the district line, 000?
Is that the general fund?
They're all general funds.
Yep, it's all
That's
general
all
fund
we
at this
have
time.
right
I have a
now.
question.
So it would
Go
be any
ahead,
of the ones
Christie.
that start with 000.
So the administrative salary pool for 40,000. Can you explain what that is?
That's the salary pool. We don't, so if you look at all our administrators lines, the number stayed the same. And so that would be a salary pool for our administrative team, people who are not under contract, multi-year contracts, and we budgeted it at 2%. Now, that doesn't mean people will get 2%. That's what we budgeted it at.
So it's like a bonus.
No, it would be a salary increase. So it would be whatever the school board determined, based on my recommendation, would be a salary increase.
And last year, it said prior year's budget 10,000, current year budget 40,000.
What page you on, Christie?
35.
It's also can be used if you have change in administration, there's a difference in the salary as well. Let's say we lose our business manager and we hire one, and we end up having to pay more for one, that's where we would take that excess from, or vice versa, if you added to it.
I am on
Look at the very bottom in the handwritten page.
35.
So this year, it's a $40,000 budget, Christie. 35,000 is being proposed for next year.
Okay, because it's 5,000 less because you have one administrator less.
No, we just took everybody's salary and multiplied it by 2%. Again, that's not to say that everybody will get a 2%, they all may get a 0%, it's whatever, we need to have a budgeted number in there to be able to offer something, and our shifts in, like Keith said, shifts in administrative staffing.
Further
Are
questions?
we going to go through this?
If you'd like to, right now, that's up to you. If you wanna just get a general overview and pound at it, on Tuesday, because we're gonna continue going like this on Tuesday. We're gonna start back at the beginning and move through.
Okay.
So if you have some
Okay.
big general questions, we can always end up earlier today, too. It doesn't have to be, it's up to you. And I do see the Budget Committee members down there, too, so if you're interested. Go ahead, Scott.
When are we going to get, like, revenue numbers? Because
We're bringing them to the board on Monday.
Okay, the reason why I asked that question is that I saw that on some of these sheets, there's like paraprofessionals that maybe with a one-on-one aid for like a sixth grader in New Boston or something, or Dunbarton, and then that paraprofessional then comes into,
The
under
revenue
our
side.
umbrella.
Correct.
So even though that there is an increase here, which I saw in a couple of these lines, I just wanna make sure that it's offset on the revenue piece.
Yeah, the board will see revenues on Monday, so they just haven't seen them yet.
Would that give us enough time, perhaps, to get anything to us during the day on Tuesday? We could look at it Tuesday night, or?
Potentially.
Anticipate it.
Okay.
Depends if there's any,
Any
it
discussion or
depends if the
changes.
budget, if the board finds some problems with it.
Okay. Okay. We can always listen in, too.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have anything, or we're just gonna jump into the next section?
I just got a quick question on the budget books, right? What shot have we got of getting this electronically?
You got it.
You got it.
Sorry.
This whole,
Last night.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
last
sent it out, probably last night. I got it, I think he sent it to me
Thanks, Rick.
Thursday night?
Yeah, sometime Thursday.
Thursday, yeah, and I was out most of the day, and I didn't get there to it until probably last night. It was better than the ones I sent out early this morning. Yes, Jen?
Stacy, if I could ask, could you tell me a little bit about the district temporary help? What kind of work that includes?
Yep, can you show me what page it's in?
I'm just looking at the top sheet, actually, so it's 2620.
Yep, that would be
113.
facilities.
Okay.
So that would be kind of what I talked about earlier. That would be if a custodian was out sick, either short-term or long-term, bringing in somebody to help support that. It also helps us in the summertime. We hire additional staff in the summer. Obviously, in the summer, we empty our buildings basically and clean them and scrub them and strip and wax floor. So we need additional support to do that, at for example, at Maple Ave, our 2 custodians can't possibly do that, all that work. So we bring in extra help to do that. So it kind of supports 2 things. One is when a custodian is out sick, but also additional support for the summertime to do maintenance on our buildings.
Thanks.
And that was one of those historical spendings. We looked back and said, boy, we overspend this line every year. Let's budget accurately.
Saying no more, why don't we just progress to the next one, Stacy? Thank you.
Absolutely. So Bartlett, again, the 2010-2011 budget for Bartlett is at 1.85. 11-12, we're proposing a $2 million budget. It's an increase of $183,000 or 9.9%. But again, when you look at salary and benefits, 1.6 million. Currently 1.77, and again, I talked earlier about the increase. Some of that is the staffing, is those new staff people. Salary and benefit increase is 11%. So you can see we obviously cut other things to be able to accommodate that 11% salary and benefit increase. It also includes 1 new staffing request for that 3rd grade teacher based on our class size. And then I talk a little bit about some of the other staffing increases were for those 2 new programs we developed.
The staffing and benefits increase is contractual, right?
Say that again?
Those increases are contractual?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna have
So
to.
again, going back to the slide before that, the salary and benefit increases are our teacher contract, so our teachers moving everybody up a step in the track, our benefit costs. It does not include para-educator salary increases.
Are those contractual as well?
Those are, but we're negotiating a contract for next year, so that will show up in a warrant article. Okay. Those things, if they get an increase, that will show up in a warrant article, those increases, and voted on separately.
Okay. Thanks.
So some significant increases or decreases. At Bartlett, salary and benefits, we had an increase due to the request for 1 new teacher. I also again want to point out that we already moved 1 reading teacher into a 1st grade classroom position. It has reduced class size for 1st grade, but it provides less reading support. We had an equipment, regular ed equipment increase due to the need to replace some of the FM systems in our classrooms. At Bartlett, we have an FM system in every classroom. And what those are, it's a kind of a stereo sound system, so there's speakers in the classrooms. The teacher wears a microphone so that it's stereo sound, so no matter where you are in that classroom. One of the things with Bartlett is it's an old building, so the sound is really crummy in our classrooms, and so the teachers talk into the microphones. We actually, Glen Lake also has them in there. We bought many of them through grants previously. What it does is it allows the teacher to talk in a normal tone, so the teacher doesn't get hoarse after spending a day. They can talk just like this, but every student can hear the same sound and the same volume because it's surrounded. For the elementary schools, it's a significant increase, particularly at our lower levels where we're teaching kids to learn how to read, and you have sound symbol relationships, and you're trying to get the letter C for K, and the teacher doesn't have to scream K, and every student can hear that. So research really shows that for the lower grades, it does actually help reading instruction. So we do have a couple of systems in Bartlett that are probably going on 8 to 10 years old that just they're starting to die and will need to be replaced. So we're looking at kind of a systematic replacement of them. You'll see a 1490 to the 599 line. There's been an increase there due to assemblies. That was a budget reduction we did this year. We did not fund any assemblies. And so we are asking for those to come back. We had the 2120 612 line. We had an increase in guidance testing. The Reading Streets program that we purchased has end-of-unit assessments and end-of-year assessments, and there's a cost for those assessments, and so there's a slight increase to purchase those tests. Again, it's a comprehensive system, and so for fidelity of the program, you do the assessments. Part of doing the assessments is identifying those students who aren't meeting standards and meeting where they should be so that we can provide them supplemental services. Making sure that by the time they end the year that they are on grade level. The 2620 has been an increase. Some of the things that are in there, we're looking to resand 2 of the classroom floors. 2 years ago, actually, this had been in the budget for several years and kept getting put off, but 2 years ago, we resanded. We have 4 classrooms in that building that have hardwood floors. We resanded 2 of the floors and repolyed them. They look great. Obviously, if we want to keep our hardwood floors and keep them as functional in our classroom without having to take them out or put overlays on them or do something with them, we need to take care of them. We budgeted last year for the other 2 classrooms. We cut them out of the budget, and so we're asking for them to be put back in so we can do those last 2 classrooms to keep our floors. They're beautiful floors. I think they're probably somewhat original to that building.
1920s.
Yeah. And then our server room at Bartlett is a little tiny closet. And so we're looking to put air conditioning in that server room. We spend a lot of money on technology and a lot of money on our servers. And the last thing we want to do is have them continuously crash. We had that problem at the high school. We put some air conditioning in the closet that we have all of our servers. The high school is our hub for servers. And so we put air conditioning in that, and that has helped significantly. We were crashing our Power School server every other day. That has decreased significantly based on doing that. We also decreased our natural gas costs, and that's based on historical spending. We changed over to gas when we did the addition, and so we didn't have a historical number for what we were budgeting for gas. We now have a couple years of history, so there's been a decrease there. We also increased transportation for field trips. Again, currently we cut that out of the budget and it's not funded. So if we went on field trips, parents were paying 100% or our parent groups were kicking in some cash to do those.
I see the furniture and fixture line, 733 at 3,600.
What page?
It was, I'm sorry, I am on the computer one, so,
No, it's 80. It's 80.
you on page 80?
Yeah.
That would be 2620, 733.
Yep. Bartlett was asking for some bookcases. The furniture in Bartlett is as old as the building. Some of the bookcases are wearing and tearing and breaking down. And so David had originally requested 12 new bookcases. I reduced it by 6, figuring it by half, and then the school board thought it was a safety concern, and so we added them back in. So that is to purchase new bookcases for the classrooms.
We have 6 classrooms there now?
10, 11, 12. We'll have 11.
Okay, is that including or not including the ones out back?
The special ed. We don't have any classrooms that way. The library's in the portable.
Oh, cool, okay.
Yeah, at Bartlett, the library's in the portable. And that should be something, if people don't know, we have 2 portable classrooms in our buildings, in our schools. We have one at Bartlett that houses our library and some offices. And we have one at Maple Lab that houses 2 classrooms, 2 4th grade classrooms. So do we have any questions at Bartlett?
I do.
Go ahead, Christian.
So the bookcases are $300 a piece. What are the books on presently?
They're on bookcases, but they're old. And so when the shelving starts to break again, it's a safety question when bookshelf, they're old books. I would say, David, how old would you say your bookshelves are? 1950s vintage?
They're old, and actually some of them are old copies that we haven't used and put them beside it to make them into bookshelves.
In other words, they're old.
And what vendor? Do you go to a particular vendor?
We would shop around. I mean, obviously, and look for something. We'd need something that fits the space, so you're kind of a little limited.
Right.
So we'd try to find what vendors have have bookshelves that fit that space, and then we'd compete it. We'd call different vendors and find out different prices.
You're going to talk about the arts and crafts at the high school making the bookcases?
No.
Oh, okay, then go ahead.
I think the issues, again, I'm just trying to throw the gorilla in the room again. Salaries, benefits, retirement.
Yeah.
I mean, all these other things, even if you add them all up, don't add up to a whole lot. And it's the salaries, the retirement. I mean, I'm looking at the increases in salary, I look at the increases in health benefits, I look at the increases in retirement. And then you add that new teacher, and that is probably 95% of Bartlett's budget.
I was going to ask.
Hold on, Bartlett's budget
what percentage?
is 80. Hold on, I have that number.
I'm just doing it off the cuff. I don't have a calculator, but it seems to me that that's the lion's share of it.
87% of Bartlett's budget is salary and benefits.
All salary, administration, teachers, maintenance, okay, 87?
87%.
Doesn't leave much wiggle room, does it?
just not going to go line by line, you know.
No, I know, it's one of those, it's just one of those things
I
where
know,
I'm looking through and I'm
When you
like.
start to look at it, there's not a whole lot.
Because one of my questions was on that retirement, and if I could ask, there was one, page 49, and this says here, it's like a third of the way down, it says retirement contributions.
Yes.
It says, prior year was 46,663, current year is 55,325, and then for the next year, for this coming budget, is 73,959, which seems a lot higher than what you had on that first slide for the overall retirement going from.
The overall is the 9.7, right?
That's a lot more than.
Yep. And I'd have to go back because it's probably different staff. It could be different staff in those lines that are more expensive. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, right.
Right, it's based on your
You
salary.
have more
so
tenured people, it's gonna be a
it's
hell of
gonna
a
be a
lot more
higher,
than.
yep.
Right.
Also, if you look at it, you're going, the salaries themselves are higher.
Right.
Yeah.
Total
Yeah,
salaries go
that's-
from 690,
Right.
let's round it to 698 to 757, so you got one there. But what we're missing here is the actual. We have to go get the actual expense of the prior year, because budget to budget, when I look at it, doesn't do anything for me. I need to compare that to the actual. We don't
Remember,
have
the
that
actual
in
is only
this.
good, like on these lines, the actual is only good if the same exact staff are in those positions.
Yes, but it's always nice to see that unless you have that, even if you grabbed everybody together and looked at
Yeah.
total, we'd have to look at it. But doing budget adjustments, we need to come back to find out where they are in the groups for 1,100 or 1,200, anything that, to do comparison. So it's, I'm going to go to Ray first, then I'm
Your
going to come back.
electronic version of the budget contains all of that history, so if you wanna run off of that, you'll see the numbers.
The actuals?
Yep.
The 2000, I see 2009, 2010, that's the actual line, right? Yeah, that's what I'm looking here. That's why when they asked me what page I was on the electronic, so that's good. So remind us, when you start looking at the guys, column B, C, and D are actual costs. Then the 210, 211 current budget, principal's budget, admin budget,
Don't look for B on there.
school board's budget, and the change. So we have it there, it's just not on.
So it is budgeted at that 11.1.
GMR is guaranteed.
GMR
Maximum.
reduction.
That's the highest our increase can be for
54.
health insurance. And that's an average. We have different amounts for different plans, but the
You
average
guys,
is.
you guys work with LGC on that? Is that where you're getting it?
Yeah, LGC gives us that number.
But we won't know dental till the end of November?
Dental, we haven't heard from dental. We haven't had a huge increase in dental, so we budgeted 5. Our increase this year was 5.5, so we budgeted 5. It's been about in that 4 to 5 range, so.
Okay.
We stayed historically on that one.
Okay.
And then what we should get, usually it happens just around deliberative session time, we'll get the actual number, for health insurance.
Kathy?
At our finance meeting that we had at the last budget committee meeting, the town is looking at another insurance provider instead of LTC. I was just wondering if the school was gonna also do that, maybe piggyback with them so to get a better rate altogether?
Yeah, and that has not been a conversation at the board level.
Okay, well, would there be any consideration to do that, or?
That would have to go to the board, that's
Hey,
not-
we got board members here. Keith, would that be something you guys could talk
I'm
about?
not aware that the selectmen had
Yeah.
actually decided to make their decision to go and look, so I'd be glad to get their information and bring it to the board. Was everybody looking at me?
Because
Because
We're just
I'm
talking
your shoulders
about
to say,
I'm,
who are you
I'm
looking
watching
at?
YouTube videos, I mean, Primex was the other municipal.
Public employee pool.
We had looked at Primex, yeah. And we do use Primex for our liability insurance.
Further questions on the committee or full board?
Actually, Primex, we did get a quote, I believe, Ray, from them 2 years ago, was it? Last time we checked with them. They were significantly different than the LGC, they were higher.
Mountain View.
Okay, Mountain View Middle School, we have a current budget of 7.6 million, a proposed budget of 8.1, or a difference of 5.5, or 6.62%. Again, when you look at the portion for salary and benefits, the 10-11 budget is 6.8, proposed 7.4, a difference of 5.18, or a 7.53% increase, and 91% of that budget is salary and benefits.
Yes, Dan, I got it.
Excellent.
Divide one by the other, and that's how you get that. So at Mountain View, we have one additional budget request. That was a paraeducator for the library. That was a position we cut in this year's budget. We have a librarian at the middle school, no paraeducator associated with that. So at the board level, we determined to add that back in. We also have a request for 5 new one-to-one paraeducators. Again, 4 would be reimbursed by the New Boston School District, 1 to be reimbursed by Dunbarton. So they're an increase in your budget, which is some of that salary increase. But they would be, you would see them in the revenues as being reimbursed by those school districts. And they pay the actual cost of them, not an
So
Oh.
average. That would affect.
Have a dollar
Right.
amount for those 5?
Because that'll affect the 91%.
Well, it's not, I'm
5?
looking at what's the increase, because I have the calculation that I perform every year, and I'm trying to figure out where that 1.7 million is coming from.
You have it. About $38,000 per paraeducator.
A piece?
Yes.
Times 5, that'd be about 190.
Yep.
So those.
And that's
Everything.
salaries, benefits,
Yep.
whatever. Okay, cool, thank you.
So some of the significant increases or decreases you'll see in these lines. An increase in music supplies. This was reduced in the current budget. It's currently budgeted at $250. That was one of the lines we reduced last year, so we're looking to bring it back up to level funded. That provides music materials, music supplies for the music department. We had a significant decrease in books. This year in the budget, we're purchasing our English language arts revision. So we're looking at new textbooks for 7th and 8th grade for English language arts. That's in this current year's budget, so it's not budgeted for next year, so you'll see a significant decrease there. Last year, we were looking at the K-8 English language arts and the high school, everybody. It was our English language arts revision cycle. With the budget cuts, we pushed off the high school, and we pushed off the high school. Actually, you'll see it in the proposed budget at the high school. We kept Mountain View's 7th and 8th grade in this year's budget, and we took out the elementary schools and paid for it with ARA. So there was a decrease next year over that. There's an increase in technology requests, again looking at some additional smart boards and a few Proximas for some classrooms who don't have them. There's a decrease in replacement equipment. An increase in, you'll see in the 1200-641 line, you'll see this at the high school as well, an increase in special ed print. And again, as grants and the state cut back, it comes down to the local taxpayer for paying for some things, excuse me. We now are required, if we have a student who is visually impaired, we're now required to purchase large print textbooks for them. There used to be a company that used to do that for us for free. We could loan and lend the books. That company no longer exists. It was, I think, funded through the state, through different grants, and that no longer happens. So we now have to purchase those textbooks. And again, that's required by law for us to do that. So there's an increase in there. Athletics, there's an overall decrease. Some of the individual lines have been adjusted. One of the things we've been working with Steve Fountain on all of our athletics lines is being made more detailed. So you'll no longer, you don't tend to see, if you looked back 5 years, it was like supplies. Now it's a little bit more spelled out what we're buying for equipment, so there's a little more accountability in those lines. I know it's an area we continuously look at, so we've been working with Steve to make sure that lines are in the right places, that we're accountable for all of those expenditures. So you'll see different changes in the lines, but overall there's been an overall decrease. Guidance and health services, just an overall decrease in supplies, materials. Media has been a slight increase due to the library para that we added back in the budget, and so you'll see that in the media lines, which are your 222 lines. In administration, we have an overall decrease, and one of the things that we did when one of our assistant principals, who was from Michigan, decided he wanted to move back to Michigan, we met with administration and we realigned our positions. We changed an assistant principal's position to a dean of student position, which comes at a lower salary cost, and so we budgeted next year for that dean of students as well, as opposed to an assistant principal. So we'd like to continue with that model. It seems to be working. 2620, we have an increase. In maintenance, we need to do some roof maintenance, and we need to resand the gym floor and refinish the gym floor again. That's a project that's been in the budget for a couple years, that continuously gets cut. And again, how many, a couple more years and you won't be able to fix it. So we'd like to tackle that project. And again, I talked earlier about the seal coating and the patching. So we looked at Maple Ave and the middle school of doing those on kind of a cyclical thing, looking at maybe doing 1 or 2 schools next year, and as opposed to doing them all at one time, space them out a little bit into a cycle. And I can take any questions. I don't have a question slide.
This is just a quick question, because I walked in just, to return just on the heel of the conversation. There was a discussion about the percentage of the budget that was attributable to salaries and benefits. Did I hear correctly that that was 91%?
Correct.
And then there was a question after that about the para-educators and the observation that that might affect the 91%. Regardless of where the revenues come from to pay for that, we still need to budget for them, and therefore it doesn't impact the proportion of the budget.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Sure.
Correct.
Okay.
It's called gross appropriation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Give the board
You'll
another
stop
30
focus.
seconds. All set. I look.
Getting tired.
We got a lot. Well, it's a lot of looking and it's a lot to absorb. So we're going to continue this on Tuesday night. You guys try to take some time. Now, take some time between now and Tuesday night, and we'll be able to get some more done. Any particular questions? This is Mountain View, right?
We just finished them up.
Yeah. Any questions?
No, I'm sorry, because I noticed behind you.
Well, she didn't have a slide.
I didn't have a question slide.
She didn't have a
I just
question
moved
slide,
forward.
so
I'm sure we will have some.
on Mountain View or the high school?
Mhm.
Mountain View, come next week. Why don't we just go ahead and segue?
Well,
Oh,
I
do you
got
have
just
something,
one
Bill?
small one.
Go ahead.
How much, I guess this would pertain to the high school too, how much available room is there at either school? Let's say if there was one class that needed to be built, could we just move it there?
No, there's absolutely no space at either school. I believe at Mountain View, there may be one classroom that we're using kind of for a response to intervention class for individual instruction. The high school, we actually have teachers who don't have a classroom that floats. So if you were to, for example, if you were to say, let's move 4th grade out of the elementary to the middle school, there's not enough space to add. Mountain View, Jim, there's probably, if you had to add a classroom, there's probably one classroom, I'm thinking.
There's a one-time dip in the 5th grade
Oh, that's
population.
true.
It moves into 6th, so a year.
So 3 years from now, we'd have
September,
nothing.
we'll go up back to expanded 8 sections versus 6.
Yeah.
Right now, they're being used for literacy classrooms.
Yeah, so that, our current 5th grade class going into 6th grade is about 2 classrooms smaller than the other classes. It's about 100 students versus like 140. And so we have space because that class is there. So like last year, we decreased 2 teachers in the budget. Those 2 teachers will follow through that class, so we'll be minus 2 teachers. They'll shift back to, because the 4th grade going into 5th grade will be back up to the normal kind of our average numbers. So that minus 2 teachers will shift through. So once that class is in 8th grade going to 9th grade, we'll actually need to add 2 teachers back into the budget and those 2 classrooms back into space. So right now there's 2 classrooms that are currently used for kind of literacy or individual instruction, but in 3 years they will not be available because we'll have even classes back again. We just have one really small class. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Long answer, but.
Yeah.
Okay, looking at Goffstown High School, the current budget is just a little over $12 million. The proposed budget is $12.9. The difference of $843,000, or 6.97%. Obviously, as the budgets get bigger, that difference gets bigger. The proportion or salary and benefits for the current year is 9.5. The proposed is 10.1. Difference of $613,000, or 6.41%. Now, this is the one school that salary and benefits aren't the same, so it's about a 79. Salary benefits cover about 79% of the high school budget. Because at the high school, you also have all of your ancillary things. So you also have things like we have the GAP program in there, we have vocational tuition, we have driver's ed that we're required to provide. The cost of doing business at the high school is also higher, so our costs for, like, say, our art classes, are, at the middle school for art, you're doing, you might do paper and pencil, there's different activities at the high school. You get more into art where you're buying higher end paper, you're buying different supplies. Our wood shops are doing different things, so the cost of doing business at the high school is much higher, based on that fact, so that's why you have the discrepancy there for the high school. So the new staffing requests, we've added, at the town's request, we've added the school resource officer to our budget. And so that was an increase of, I believe, $50-something thousand. And you'll see that under, I believe it's the administrative lines we put it in. And again, 2 new para educators, both being reimbursed by New Boston. So, and you'll see that increase, but it'll come in as our revenue.
What percentage of the SRO do the other 2 communities reimburse us?
Right now,
Well, I
nothing.
mean,
the
you're going to
town
be
pays
billing
it.
them for a
Yeah.
portion of that, right?
It would be whatever the proportionate share of our tuition rate is. So they would pay, that would be included in that salary would be included in our tuition rate. So
Have
we
you
don't
got a
say.
rough idea?
30%, right?
About 30%?
Yeah.
About 15,000 of the 50? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So district-wide, we have about 7 new para-educators that are going to be reimbursed directly reimbursed,
Correct,
not
right.
part of a formula.
Goffstown, we did not increase our paraeducator support for Goffstown students.
The 2 for the high school are also about 38,000 apiece? Okay. That's everything? Okay, thanks.
Stacy, the SRO, is the reporting relationship for that officer still up through the police department?
Yes, we're gonna, actually, how we've set it up is that we put it as a consultant, that the police department would still own the resource officer, we would reimburse them for the services. I've had previous conversations with the chief, and for us to own the resource officer, I don't have the ability to maintain his standards and his professional development, what he needs to do. I can't buy guns, I can't, so, I don't know, I wish, different, huh? So we've decided that. So we determined that it would be best that the police department continued to own him, we would just reimburse them for the cost of when he was in our building. So it would be, it's 180 days, that's what that I think it was $54,000 was for the 180 days of the school year.
And the concern we had in prior years that I've heard was that for some reason, if there's some shortage someplace in town and that SRO wasn't there, but in town, that would be accounted for.
Absolutely. We've actually, this year, just to try to get a basis, we've asked the SRO to kind of sign in, sign out, keep a log of when he's in our building versus not in our building so that we can accurately reflect what we should pay for.
Totally fair.
Yep, so.
Bill?
Does that SRO go to different schools or just strictly the high school?
No, he's strictly at the high school.
Okay.
He may go to if there's an emergency or crisis, he may be called to other schools, but he's based at the high school. His role is at the high school.
Okay.
So looking at just some significant increases or decreases, in general supplies, we had a slight increase for kneecap testing, and some cost increases for just consumables for the classroom, such as wood shop, metal shop. Wood goes up, it's an expense. We can't do less projects, we still have to do things with kids, and so some of that you'll see as increases. We did budget some money for kneecap testing. Again, one of the things we talked about was encouraging our students to do better, and so we've offered some incentives. One of the biggest incentives that we really think worked was offering them waivers, not waivers from their final exams, because they still take finals, but from the final exam period, and that was huge. They really loved that thought. So if they scored proficient or proficient with distinction, they could take their finals before the exam period. But we also did budget some money just for kind of incentives for providing and making sure that they were ready to take the test and the right mindset to do that.
Is this a kneecap testing?
Kneecap, yes. Yep.
This is where we scored like 7th and
Correct.
6th, and that's a tremendous incentive.
It was tremendous, absolutely.
And that was in the past where we may not have scored so well. Because I had heard some talk on a school board to say, let's give them incentive, and that is probably one of the biggest incentives.
Absolutely. We did, not to stray up, but we tried to really be creative, look at what motivates kids. And final exams was huge. Once we put it out there, they were like, yeah. That's all the kids talk about now is if I score 3 or 4, I get out of my. They don't get out of the final exam. They're still taking the final exam. It's just not during. Yeah, we try not to tell them. They still take the final exam just during the end of the day at the class. The last class period.
Is there a delay in how this goes out?
Can we edit this? But we gave them. We raffled off different things. As you know, we went to charging students for parking, so it's $100 now to park at the high school. So we raffled off a couple. I think 2 or 3 parking passes. And so students, if they came in on time, they got a raffle ticket. If they looked like they were showing effort, they got a raffle ticket. And so every day we did some raffles. I think the middle school, we did that this year as well. We gave the prom committee donated a couple of sets of prom tickets. And so we were able to give them really good incentives. And it worked. Our scores went up. Kids, and one of the things that we found was the staff really took it seriously. It was no longer like this test because we obviously have repercussions by not doing well on those assessments. Yeah. First off, the community impact of saying we're a school in need of improvement or a district in need of improvement isn't the greatest thing, but it also has an impact on us as teachers. You look at those scores and say, we know our students are doing better. We know they're learning. How do we do that? So motivating them, we went from, page 2, when you list all the schools, page 2 to, top of the grid. So it is pretty impressive. So there's some money in there for kneecap tests. Again, I talked earlier about the books. There's a significant increase of $124,000. That's for the English language arts revision cycle. Again, we're putting it off another year and doing the high school next year to even it out. We started this year with K to 6. Next year, we budgeted this year, so we'll be purchasing the material. 7th and 8th grade is piloting some programs right now. We'll be starting that, and then next year we'll be looking at the high school to purchase things for the following year. So that is another significant expense.
That's which subject again?
English language arts.
English language arts. On the first bullet again, we're talking about consumables for wood shop and metal shop. And I was kind of serious when I said earlier that they're looking for bookcases at Bartlett. Do they not be wood? The metal? We have both metal shop and workwear. Could this be
we
like
could absolutely look at it.
At $300 a pop, I'm sure that the materials can be less than that. That would be and plus, you put it on, they can almost carve their name into the bookshelves. It goes over to Bartlett. 20 years later, they have their own kids coming in.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful. Okay.
Let's see, the 731, again, we're looking to some additional purchase of smart boards. Increasing our technology base. 735, a reduction in replacement equipment. 1200, 641, there's that increase you'll see due to the need to buy large print books. Vocational tuition, the 1300, 561, we've reduced that. Again, we've reduced that based on historical usage, and so I think it's about a $10,000 reduction. Again, that's another line that we've just looked at historically, how many students have gone. It's a program we can't really limit number of kids to say only the first 100 that apply can go, but we think we're pretty confident in the number that we've budgeted. 1420 in athletics, there's an increase in new equipment. One of the things we're looking to purchase is a protective floor covering for the gym floor. As you know, 3 years ago, we had the flood at the high school. We have a new gym floor, thank you to our insurance company. It is a beautiful gym floor, and we would like to keep it beautiful for many, many years to come. The current gym floor, the current covering we have is kind of it's a thin mat, and it folds up, and you just unfold it. Well, one of the problems with that mat is that we use it for all of our schools whenever we have functions or things that we need to put covering on the floors. It gets folded up, it gets put in the truck, it comes to the next school, it gets put on the floor and gets unfolded. There's no way to clean it, there's no way to get I guess you could spread it out and sweep it, but there's always dirt, and so one of our concerns is that, are we doing more damage by putting it on the floor? We have a craft fair at the high school, and they walk on the floor, and there's rocks underneath it, and it now gets more embedded into the floor. So we're looking for, I believe that gym floor covering is ancient. It's been here at least as long as me. I would say it's got to be 15 or 20 years old. So we're looking to buy a new floor covering that's a roll-up floor covering that rolls up so we can clean it. It would be only at the high school to, again, protect an investment. It was an expensive floor. It's a beautiful floor, and we want it to last the next 50 or 60 years. So taking care of it while we can and being proactive on maintenance. So we're looking to do that. We also need to replace a little bit of equipment. We had several football helmets that didn't pass inspection. We have to send our football helmets out every year to be inspected by a company. I believe we had 9 that did not pass, and so there is, or actually I think there may have been, I think it was 12 that didn't pass, but we're only going to replace 9 of them. And so again, there's something that's a costly item. And then our senior athletic banquet is an increase. You'll see that had been formerly paid by the Lions Club, and is no more. I believe we're maybe working with them to maybe look at that again, but in the meantime, it is something that we'll need to pick up, unless they pick up that cost. There's nurse, it's just a slight increase in paper products. Audio visual, we increased that by $4,000 when the conversion from digital to analog happened. We lost all of our cable at the high school, so this will bring our access back up to provide cable in all of our classrooms like we had before. There's the 2430 to 339 line. You'll see the increase in the school resource officer. Let's see, in the 2620, there's money in there for gym floor sanding and polishing. We do that every year at the high school. There's some exterior door replacement. Again, I think we talked about that earlier. Some of our doors are ancient, and we're trying to get on a cycle of replacement of them so that literally, if you go back, we replaced some garage doors. I think literally you could have gone up and shaken them and they would have opened. And of course, that leads us to a lot of exposure. We have a lot of expensive equipment in our schools, so we want to make sure our buildings are as secure as they can be. It also includes media carpet replacement. So the carpet that's in the media center, that is, I believe, more than 20 years old, replacing that. And replacement of some of the tables and chairs in the cafeteria. Vocational transportation, you'll see an increase. We now have students going, we used to have students going one section, we now have students going 2, so we need to provide transportation. So we have an AM bus and a PM bus. And then field trip transportation, again, we had to decrease that line this year, so we're bringing that back up a little bit. It still isn't to the same level that it had been, but it has increased. And I think that was it for JHS.
Could you go back 2 slides real quick, just so I can get one of the numbers? Wait a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Questions on the high school? I've got 4 items that, just as we were going through today, that I kind of pulled out saying these are things that are in the requested budget that weren't funded in the budget you're in today. What I'm looking for are some of those other items that we may have missed. At MVMS, we have 5 reimbursed para-educators, about $190,000. We have the school resource officer appropriation, about $50,000. The high school, 2 reimbursed para-educators, $76,000. And the English language arts purchasing, because we took the textbooks out last year, that's about $124,000. That's about $440,000 total of what I'm going to call, let's say, new programs that aren't currently funded anywhere. So it's not like we bought English books or language books last year, math books. Remember, in past years we've done that, and they just kind of replaced each other. Those weren't there. The reason is because I did a calculation, and I was looking at it, and just straight up looking at the default budget, because the default budget is about $1,094,000. Well, not about. The current look at a default budget. Everybody, we have to know that the default budget is maneuvering depending on contractual obligations thing. Right now, it's $1,094,573, less than the request. So what I'm trying to take a look at, even from that number, what are the new programs that might be affecting that? And so far, I've identified 440,000, which still leaves me another 650 to find from the.
Special education was huge. The special education tuition lines are a decrease of, I don't have it in front of me, but it's probably around 600,000.
I think it was close to 7. But you're also, yeah, it's close to 7. You're also missing the
Where-
late bus that was put back in this year. The late bus was put back
Those are
in
the
this
kind
year.
of things, is that something that you could put together for me? Is that, because I can look through the budget and it might be one place, it might be in a
We
bunch
can
of
try to
other
look at-
places.
What I can do is, Ray and I can sit down and go through the budget and try to identify what was kind of.
That wasn't there,
What was
'cause-
cut this year that's new next year, but also we added the third grade teacher in,
So if there was an ex,
700,000 was just a
special ed, yeah. So remember in the beginning,
And
I
how-
talked about those 564, the district lines at 564, 561, and the 339 lines. That was an overall decrease, so that is subtracted out of the default budget because we lowered those expenses. So that was a huge number.
right, so what I'm trying to do is do some kind of comparison, and that does the $1,094,000. The other calculation I do annually when I look at this is I look at the expense that was actually done at June, and when I take a look at the year-end expense, add in 100% of the encumbrances at the end of the year, we come up with $32,036,000. Then I add into it the default adjustment of the current budget year-end, which is little over 1.7 million. And the default adjustment that's in the current year budget is 239,000 and change. That totals up to just shy of $34 million. And the current request is 35.7, so there's a 1.7. There's a default of about 1.1. The actual is about 1.7, so there's about $600,000 difference between the actual expense and the default, plus another 600,000. So I'm trying to find all of those programs in my mind to try to, I will put this on paper for you
I was like, wow, I
fellas.
just lost all those numbers.
I got about halfway from here to Los Angeles, and now I'm lost. So if you would do
and
us the service of
I would-
spelling out exactly what
Yes,
you said.
I will put it out to try to come, because I need to work in my mind, what's missing, what is it? It's a big budget. I love all the detail to read some of the stuff, because, and it's been there for years, so that works. We still have to go, remember I said I want to see actuals, so it's good to go here, and I see the actual expenditures, and that works. Then I go back here to look at the detail, so it's, and then we have the salaries and benefits, so we've got the tools, I think, to be able to do what we need to do. They're in different spots, but it's real helpful. And I'll try to put that together to see if you can help us, or help me, and then I can help us to see whether we can put a hand around, the primary thing is to look at the default budget. Because if everything went to the warrant right now, it would still say, if the budget didn't pass, it would be approximately $1.1 million less. And so the sale for you guys would be, what's that
What's in
1.1 million? For me, it's like, what's the 1.7 million? Because I looked at the actual versus the budget for last year. And some of that could be, we really, kept our money tight, and we did this, but these are the things we didn't do because of it. And that's kind of like what I'm looking for. It would be helpful. Further questions from the group?
Just, the last one you have in your packet is the food service budget, and I won't spend a lot of time on it because it is an in and an out. We can only spend what we take in.
Did we get, I don't think we got the food service or the federal budgets.
You don't have the federal, but I think the food service, did they get the food service? It's in the very back.
I've only got Fund 10. Are you talking about the handout?
It's on page,
Yeah, help me out here. I've got 268 pages total.
Yep, I don't have it either.
maybe they don't have food service. We can get it to you. I thought it was included.
Although we did have breakfast treats.
The food services didn't pay for those.
Dude, I think Keith made them, or his kids made them.
Thank you.
So here's just an overview of food service, and again, some of the increase comes from where we have a new food service director, and she has really delved into the budget and is really working hard on cost containment and looking at different things, and so I think we have a really actual representation of our budget of where we need to be, so that was food service.
And we should see revenue, on the revenue side, that we'll probably get, hopefully by Tuesday, equal to the appropriation.
Correct.
and it'd be nice, now the federal program revenues are greater than the Fund 22, because there are some of those funds that pay for general fund programs. If I'm, no, not at all? I'm saying,
No, Fund 22, the federal grant programs,
Yes.
Dan, are specifically identified as Fund 22 grant individual
Right,
programs. We don't bring any of that into.
not the expenditure.
general fund budget.
Let me rephrase the question. We will see federal revenues that are greater than Fund 22, because some of the federal revenues that come in go to cover some of the expenditures that are in Fund 10.
No.
No, if they're in,
What are you thinking of as an example?
It's always been difficult for me to look at the revenue and match it to the appropriation on the federal side, because they're two different lines, and I haven't been able to pick those out to actually,
Typically,
because
the
some of them.
reason for that is it runs from year to year, Dan.
Yeah.
So programs that are, when we get to June 30th at the close of a year, you will have federal programs that run into the following fiscal year. So you always have a disconnect between revenues and expenditures. It's not because federal dollars get allocated into a general fund budget.
Okay. So the general fund revenues would be solely tuition from the other communities and some of the other items?
Local appropriations,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
just the last slide I have is just, I think as a community, we really need to remember that education is a community investment. If we want our children to stay in our community and not move to Massachusetts, we need to take care of them. We need to provide an appropriate education for them. We need to make sure we're meeting their needs. We want that. We want people to grow up in Goffstown and stay in Goffstown. We have to do that for them. We owe it to them. We owe it to our kids to provide them a good education. It is what makes a community. If you think about it, why do people move to Bedford or Bow? Because of their schools. You know, people aren't jumping to go to Franklin because of their schools. You know, we want to be, you know, we don't have to be, you know, the most expensive school district, but we want to be able to say we're proud of our schools, that we're doing a really good job in our community for our students. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a sign-up sheet. Could I locate that right now? Super. If we can pass that down, Joanne would love to have that in her possession. Helps her put everything. I want to thank the school board for coming, and this, I think it was easier than spending 2 or 3 nights with you guys, and you guys, I think, were able to hone in on your budget with your department head presentations and work it through. I think the selectmen did kind of like the same thing, and they spent quite a bit of time without the budget committee asking those questions on those nights, so that today is going to work, but I do expect Tuesday is going to be a big question day, and how do you think we'll handle that? Would you be able to come, or is that something that we can work through Sue and put some questions, or?
We might have no meetings already scheduled.
How did you manage that?
I mean,
It's
well,
one night next week.
with everything else that you're doing, Sue, so no more elections, so
Yeah, I
that
think it's
part of
easier
it.
for me to be there and answer questions than it is to get the questions and then have to get back. Then you get the immediate,
Yeah, that gives us time to,
to look at it and
Yeah.
get questions.
And then we'll figure out on Tuesday what we'll do next.
Okay.
All right, super, thank you. Any further questions while everybody's here?
I did have
Paul?
one. Could we be given, either emailed or if it's simple, just described, the formula from which that $9,500 cost per pupil is derived?
That would be the Department of Ed. It's right off their website.
Okay.
And,
You mean
oh,
the average cost per pupil? Yeah, that's from
Right.
the Department of Ed.
yeah, they reduce a lot of the expenses to try to average them out while the other schools, because some schools have this, some schools don't have that, so they try to put those things together. It's a comparison that is probably
Paul,
worse than the comparison I just tried to do a few minutes ago.
Paul, when you, if you surf around there, I printed it all off last night. The true cost, if you add in transportation, capital expenses, borrowing, you name it, is the state average is more like 14,500 per kid, not the 11 or 12,000 that was on that slide for the state average. But when you add all those things in, it's kind of like what Stacy said. When you add in our transportation, when you add in the special ed and all those other factors,
It's much more.
it will be much more than that 9,800. I don't know what number that was, but And that's what, when you look at those formulas, it tells you exactly what they take out and what they add back in for that other number.
At least at some level, probably the most important takeaway from their data collection process is that they're trying to compare apples to apples. So you'll see when you look at the categories, they will compare elementary, middle, and high school, and then districts. And they'll make the distinction, if you go across the lines, what is involved. So that if the only thing in a district were an elementary school, you'll see that is also their district price. So when you look at because really all it offers us is a tool for doing comparative analysis and understanding apples to apples where we exist relative to all other communities when we look at a gauge of per pupil expenditures.
Is that Chairman?
You can ask the same
Go ahead,
question.
Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, you.
I have 7 o'clock written down.
For Tuesday? That would be correct.
Okay, I just thought I heard 6:30.
No, that's a good idea. On Tuesday is our regularly Tuesday meeting.
Yes.
What we'll probably do, if the general public is interested, we'll probably do what we normally do in the beginning, and then we'll take public comment. So if there's anybody who wants to have a public comment or ask a question or something before we go into gathering more data, that's the time to do it. We'll do it close to when we start the meeting, but it will start at 7. Okay? Jen?
Same question.
Okay. Further questions of the committee?
And then do we have another one on Thursday?
No, not yet. We'll have to
No.
wait till Tuesday to find out what we're going to do.
Why did I always think they were on Thursday?
Because we're doing Thursdays, but then we have to do it Thursday because it's a holiday.
But we're gonna stop
Okay.
doing it all.
We are gonna
We'll
stop.
try figuring out. Given that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Bill Gordon,
I wish it was
seconded
on
by
Thursday. I
Bill-
made plans for
John Burt.
Yeah, yes, Bill Burr.
All those in favor on the Budget Committee? I see no objections. That's unanimous. We are adjourned.
Thank you.